112, Reconfiguration 2.0 meeting, and it is June 28th. I have the wrong one. 2017.
Roll call.
Roll call?
Ronnie? Julie?
Yep.
Ira? Megan? Lori?
Here.
Kenneth? Rocky? Melissa?
Here.
Ivan? Raphael?
Present.
Mark L?
Yes.
Carol L? Jeff?
Here.
Darren?
Here.
Ann?
Here.
Dan R?
Yes.
Davis?
Here.
Helen?
Here.
Ronald?
Here.
Mark M? Mark F? Carol D?
Yes.
Brian?
Here.
Rick?
Here.
Dan?
Yep.
Lori?
Here.
Becky?
Here.
And you have a quorum.
Yay, we have a quorum.
All right.
Okay, so we have the agenda here. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
And can I get a motion to approve the minutes from Monday night?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. And do we have public comment? No, just visiting?
Interesting party.
Great, welcome. Okay, then let's move on. Where we'd like to start tonight, for those of you who did not make it on Monday night, a quick recap of the work that we did with Link. We probably still have some packets of the information that they distributed for the people who are not here. John, do you have a couple more of those?
I'm happy to move over and get it.
These are right here. So what they walked us through was our process from last year to where we are today. The ways in which we engaged with the community, the way that we studied different things and researched different things. And in this stack that we got last week, they included all of these items. So it has the original survey that we took last June to solicit feedback about the referendum that had been on the ballot in April of last year, March. Followed by stakeholder audit, and then where they talked to a number of different people, and then we developed the Brain Trust, which described what our process was going to be and how we were going to go about things, what our goals were. And then the joint letter that went out. I don't have my stack in order anymore, I took it apart, so. The joint letter that went out with the board and the administration and 2.0 to the community about our process of working together and working for the common goal of arriving at a solution to some of these challenges. We put together our initial brochure about the challenges of the district, and that included financial challenges, facilities, educational challenges. And then we did our first round of community engagement. That brochure also promoted the first round of forums.
Those focus groups.
The focus groups that time were before the forums, excuse me, yes. The focus groups in that round were before the forums, and then we had the brochure, and then we did the forums. And with that feedback, we refined or developed our model options, and then planned for the next round of community engagement to factor those things in. We sent out another brochure for those focus groups or forums that we just had, and in this case we did the focus groups after, primarily due to timing. We also did our big survey in March and April, where we had the data that was scientific and also through different groups. So some that were, Alex, I'm going to say this wrong, but you had the groups that you were specifically targeting that were the scientific, yeah, the sample, exactly, and then everyone else was able to weigh in. So we have all of these results of community feedback, which is excellent. And then we started working with, or we had been working all along, but we nailed down some tighter project costs, working with Gilbane and Mega Hartre based on our process of refining the models down to the aid that we provided to them, and with that information, we are where we are today. And Monday night, we took a straw poll to see where everyone landed based on what we know about our forums and focus group feedback, based on what we know about the cost of the projects and our experience with the community engagement and our research and study of the educational dynamics in the community. When Link tallied up those, the straw poll that we did last week on those models, borrow yours for a second?
Sure.
Yours is so tidy. It looked like this. We had all the models, and people were able to check off which ones they felt were yeses and nos and question marks. And it was just sort of a taking the temperature exercise to see where we were so that the conversation could move forward. And
It was a straw poll, not a vote.
it was a straw poll, not a vote. So it was just a taking the temperature to see if we were coalescing around some things. The final page, Helen and Julie, the final page of the packet that John gave you has the only piece that's new in there that you haven't seen before. Oh, and Ron as well, you weren't here Monday, yes. So that final page has sort of the themes that emerged from the most recent focus groups. And in those most recent focus groups, there emerged sort of a coalescence, not as far as consensus, but a coalescence around B, D, and E with a great deal of interest in C and then less interest in F, G, and H. We've discussed a lot already the pros and cons of all of these models, recognizing that none of them are perfect, but what we're trying to do is provide the board with flexibility in their work as this continues forward. Hi guys. Sorry.
No one noticed you come in, right?
I know, very discreet.
I thought you were bringing your girls.
Yeah.
No, Dodge development was good up.
We're just recapping Monday night.
Yeah, let's make sure
We're gonna need to turn it down another.
I think we're making them up here, Ken, if you wanna.
Again, we've got training and new stuff.
I hate sitting in the front.
Kevin does it again.
We were just recapping Monday night and taking everybody through the packets, and then that the final sheet describes the themes that came up for the focus group. And then we were recapping our straw poll that we took. And so based on where we left off, there were sort of the three buckets. And what emerged in the straw poll was, again, sort of a coalescence around B, D, and E, but also some discussion points on A and C. And C had the most sort of, interest around it, but we also talked about a number of factors that might cause C to be difficult to recommend to the board. F, G, and H, again, in our poll, as well as in all the community feedback that we've seen, didn't fare quite as well. So with that, we'd like to do that exercise again. Take another straw poll and see if a couple days of thinking about things and reading through the packets and reflecting on the conversations and discussions from Monday night to see if we're still sort of in the same place or where we are.
So can I just ask a procedural question? It became clear to me at the end of the last meeting that we were maybe moving toward the idea that instead of people ultimately voting on this plan or this plan, we were sort of going to be endorsing a suite of plans to be in the final report. And if that's the case, I just want to be clear about it because I think that maybe would change some people's ideas perhaps.
Right. So thank you. Yes. So at the end of the meeting, for those of you who were still sort of awake and alert, we talked about that the coalescence is important. There was a lot of anxiety sort of around the voting dates because I think there was the sense that we were going to be voting up and down on models, and it was only going to happen on one night, and could everybody be there? And so we were back and forth on dates, and with next week being a holiday week, we realized that we have some calendar challenges, that we need to get the report going, we need to have the team form that's going to work on that, and they need to have something to work with. And when we were talking about how we're coalescing around a few of these models, recognizing that, you know, there are still discussion points, but that we need to get the report going, we do have an action item on the agenda tonight to take a vote at the end of the night to move forward with the report of proposing whatever the outcome is of tonight's discussion. So.
But we wouldn't be voting on like specific plans, we would be sort of coming to some consensus through
Correct.
this process on a grouping, and then
Right.
we'd be sort of saying, start writing the report based on that grouping?
Correct, yes.
And then
yes.
people would have a chance later on to sort of reaffirm that, maybe?
Well, we would have buckets. The way Link described it was sort of buckets that we have, and the distinguishing characteristic may be how the presentation is put together for the board, that the 2, 3, whatever it is we end up with, that we really want to present, that we really feel strongly about, that we think the board could work with and further develop and maybe great solutions, that we have that as our primary bucket. And then we also want to describe in the report some of these other buckets, things that were very interesting for a lot of reasons, that had educational benefits, but that from all of our discussions about the pros and cons, we don't know that they are as viable, and that, you know, and then there may even be a grouping that are things that just didn't fare as well. And those are conversations that we can continue to have, and certainly as we move into the report phase, there's still going to be things to consider. And
Can I pause and ask for a question to make sure everybody's tracking with this and you kind of agree with it, because it's an important part of how we kind of finish this process. Let me just finish my statement, Dan. I know Mark was also waiting for a bit to make a comment or ask a question. So essentially what it is as soon as we start putting numbers and getting anything that looks like a vote and a list of models, what we want to stay away from is the idea that we're coming up with the optimal solution.
right.
We are creating a range of options, which has always been our charter from the beginning, right? Viable options, not an option, our perfect recommendation. And what we're basically saying is, here's a group of things that basically 2.0 is comfortable saying, yes, you should look closely at those. This range of things we think is really worth looking at based on the analysis we've done and the community feedback that we've gotten, both of which are really important. And then the second group is a group of things that we think, based on those same factors, we don't recommend pursuing them, but they're still here, and here's all the pros and cons that we identified in the work that we did. There may be other factors that others would consider important, but in all the work, respecting the integrity of the work that we did, here's what led to the pros and cons, and here's what led it to be on the no list from 2.0. And then as far as the maybes, it's things that have pros and cons, and I think if we were just to stop everything based on our conversation, and I had to make a call based on our conversation on Monday, C is the example that Link pointed to and said, here's a perfect example of one that has like ambivalent feedback, right? So some people really like C, and it also had a lot of no's, so it was the most polarizing kind of feedback. Some people saw strong benefits, some people saw strong negatives about it, but it engendered a lot of feedback. So that's the kind of thing you would want to potentially keep more of an eye on versus something that got very little support, a lot of negative feedback, and not many questions. So it's as simple as yes, no, and maybe. In the context of what 2.0 has done. Not all the other ideas that are in our heads or other stuff that people might say to us, but in the respecting the process that we followed very diligently for the last 6 months, what is yes, no, and maybe based on the totality of that. And it's a fluid process that continues on after that, right? So things are new information will come up, new ideas and tweaks to things. It's inevitable, will continue to happen until the board eventually lands on the final sort of choice. And I just want to confirm that everybody kind of tracks with that and it makes sense.
Can I make, and if this is but if this doesn't follow through the plan well enough, I feel like I want a clarification of what the label for the buckets are, and if 3 buckets is the right number. Only because in my vision, in the way that I would like to fill out this, it would be worthy of further exploration by the board. And then really there should just be, in my opinion, and if you guys don't agree, that's fine, the second group should just be all together with just, there are elements of this that people have responded to favorably, and there are elements of this that people have responded to negatively. And, you know, that I think that's gonna come out in the narrative that we, you know, is in that final product. But if we're gonna go beyond, I think what Darren's kind of concern is like, hey, if we aren't adding anything new in these conversations besides just here's the stuff, like, if, I don't know if the 3 buckets is the right number of buckets. Is 2 a better way to get at this? Like, are there really questions?
I see what you're saying, that.
Like a wishy-washy category, you don't like the wishy-washy?
Yeah, I mean,
But
can
no,
we
I
just
see,
narrow it down
I see what you're
to
saying, where
worthy of conversation?
if we want to do, if we want to say, mark, you know, 3 yeses, and then the rest of them are things to consider, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, 'cause
That
I-
rather than like a yes, no, and question mark. The reason we have the question mark category is that people may not be quite ready to say no until we have a little bit more discussion. So there's a question mark category.
I think you mean for the report though, the buckets, right? For voting.
I mean, I would love for the conversation to move closer to that point faster. So if this is just a step in the process and I'm trying to jump a step that you think is really valuable, then let's go through and put yeses, nos, and question marks. But if you
We
think
can,
there is
we can change
consensus
the
of the group-
parameters, we can change the parameters. Is everybody comfortable marking 3 yeses?
No, I have 2.
Okay, is everybody comfortable marking 2 to 4 yeses?
So what Lincoln recommended
Yeah.
was limiting the choice a bit more. When we did this on Monday, they said, as many yeses or nos, you can say no to everything and say yes to everything.
Right,
The recommendation was, how about limiting the choice a bit, so you have 3 yeses, 3 nos, and 2 maybes for discussion. That doesn't mean that's where it's gonna end up
yeah,
in the
that's not
final
your
bucket.
vote, right,
But it means that you comfortably feel yes about some, and I think they were also responding to the straw poll and saying, they saw 3 buckets here.
right.
So that reaffirmed their confidence in that recommendation. So there really are a few here where there's no ambiguity about the feedback. So I guess we can still keep this idea open, but I'm suggesting that we keep 3 categories for the vote now, for the straw poll, but that we can ultimately decide
And I
what's right
think
as
that's
to
really good input
buckets.
for the report. I understand exactly what you're saying for the report so that there is clarity.
I just want to make sure Dan, the other Dan, didn't have something he still wanted to say before we go to this Dan.
And I'm not sure where this would fit in actually, but I know there have been some questions, and I'm not sure that there was a really clear answer, that there are variations on some of these proposals. Like for example, the FG and H group, particularly H, there are ways to make it more palatable.
Yeah.
A, there are ways to make A
So-
50 million
Yeah.
less expensive. Is there room, do we anticipate at least having room in the report for notes, observing
No, I think
that's
that's
areas?
great. Exactly what you just said is kind of, you know, what Link recommended too, that we need to focus on what we have in front of us for
Yeah.
our purposes, you know, tonight, but in the report, there will be opportunity to include creative variations.
Yeah, no, I absolutely don't want to start adding new proposals.
No,
Right, especially
but-
it's not just what we have in front of us, but what we've placed in front of the community
Yeah,
over
Yeah.
the last several rounds of community engagement, to pivot on that at this stage.
but I think it's important
There's
to
space
have
for it
the
in the
notes
report, of course.
and to have an observation that, you know, the board may refine some of these.
Sure.
I mean, it will refine some.
And
of
we
these.
can
And you have
suggest
to have
kind of
room for
areas
that.
of inquiry, of
And,
course.
yeah, and actually, Dan, I thought about this a great deal because I too was concerned about where the creative process goes. And that's where it goes. It goes
Yeah.
into the report as suggestions and variances and here's another way of
What
looking at
Ronnie
this.
said was the most important part. We've done the analysis. You said many important things.
This is like next year, to say that.
I set myself up on that one. Sorry. What Ronnie said was that the critical variable to understand why we don't continue to refine here is that discussion with the community that we've been
Yeah.
conducting.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, I think it's
That's
time for
That's
us
why
too to come forward with saying your ideas.
And then we continue to
Step
feed in the
forward,
ideas,
yeah.
as I think we
Right.
continue to do.
Right.
But it's important to recognize that this is a continuing process and to
Absolutely.
build that into the report.
Absolutely,
Because so much
and
of
that
the
we're not
problem
just going to
was,
drop it on the board and disappear.
Yeah.
That this is an engaged creative
Wait, what?
process that that continues. That we are, you know, our ideas and our research and everything that we've worked on is part of an ongoing process that, that the board, will look at different ways to refine things and will look at different things. And so we can make suggestions in our report about how to do that, things that we've come up with, since the forums, since the focus groups, because it is always
Such as the
evolving.
many valuable contributions that Melissa has made.
When are we gonna get a chance to like
Can I
make
ask-
suggestions like that?
Report.
For the
In the
report.
report,
So
okay.
what we're going to do, when we discuss our process for the report,
No,
we'll
it's the
talk
same
about that.
question, but I'm more literal.
So for straw poll purposes, could we consider maybe doing what we did on the very first day we met, which is rank them and test the cumulative strength of each one?
Well, I don't know, because we're not really choosing a winner.
No,
We're
we're not. This
looking
is
at
just for narrowing down to see where, what,
Maybe we could do that as a separate exercise, but not in lieu of.
Because I like this, I like Dan's idea, but what is the point of the straw poll right now? Maybe I missed it.
It's
And
just
there
narrow.
were people,
strength
if
of-
there were
to do-
people,
then
it's
to do what with?
to kick off our conversation about the models tonight, and that we want to make sure we are inclusive of people who were not here Monday night. We want to see if given a couple days to think, if everybody's head is still in the same place, so that we can dial in on whether or not we have consensus, and if we do, we can talk more specifically about those and about any that might still be in question, so that by the end of the night, we can get to a place where we're comfortable taking a vote.
Well, by ranking them, I think we can have a good indication of where consensus actually lies.
I feel like ranking them starts to move us in a different direction. We're looking for a suite, we're not looking for a ranking.
Yeah,
So
we're
the
not looking for a
agreement is,
winner.
which ones clearly arise and would be part of that package that we write the recommendations around, and which ones are the ones that we provide more comments around.
What
I
if
feel
we
like it
did-
was very deliberate not to have a ranking system.
What if we did 3
The vote is already
yeses
the
and 2
rank. How many
maybes?
people?
What if
What's
we
that?
did 3 yeses and 2 maybes? That would give us,
That's what Link suggested, and I think we're
Okay.
coming back to that, was 3 yeses, 3 nos, and 2 maybes.
oh,
And that's
great.
your total vote option.
Good idea.
Great,
Great
it's such a good idea. I don't know where I came up with it.
It's like you were on the call.
It was like I was there.
I'm sorry, you said you have to have maybes?
You have up to 2 maybes.
Oh, okay.
Those are not to exceed numbers.
You can remain silent and enigmatic if you want to.
You can't use those elsewhere.
So basically, you could
Exactly.
have unlimited no's.
Saving it all.
Up to 3 yeses.
No,
and-
you have limited nos too, you have 3, 3, and 2.
No,
But he's saying, what if you don't want any maybes?
If you don't want
just
to
want
use
to
it,
do
you
three
don't.
yeses and 5
no, only
no's.
limited on 3 yeses.
Yes, guys, it's
Yes.
But we don't need to debate this.
3 yeses.
We're gonna do 3
no.
yeses,
2 maybes.
30 hours.
and we don't all need to pick maybes. 3 yeses. Whatever you do with the rest of them is up to you. 3 yeses.
Great.
Say it 3 times and people get it.
Could you define again what the definition of a cluster is? You were saying,
So we've talked about proposing or presenting. Hey, guys, one conversation. We've talked about proposing or presenting, 2 to 3 configurations from the start to the board. So what we want to do is coalesce around which ones those are and begin writing the report.
that isn't what I mean.
Okay.
At the forum, you grouped boards and clusters, right?
Yes.
How were those clusters?
So that was just for the exercise of presenting to the community. The models are all individual models. We clustered them at the forums so that there would be a way to navigate the gallery walk. But they all are individual models. For example, one thing that we've talked about is that while D&E were together to compare programmatic things that were interesting and they shared buildings, E could easily have been with F, G, and H because it is also a low change model. It's very similar in its structure to H.
Okay,
So,
let me ask my...
The clusters were really just for the forums.
So my question is similar to the one I asked toward the end of last meeting. Let's say we have three that rise to the top, and we're going to concentrate on those, and those are ones that are going to go to the board. Let's say that I'm just doing a hypothetical, let's say all 3 were the higher priced ones, just hypothetically, or let's say all 3 were the lower priced ones. And the board, as they continue their evaluation and their much deeper look at the sustainability, which we don't have any information on now really, and further definition of cost that they're gonna do.
Correct, yes?
And let's say that the board, after doing all of that, says that, gee, we can't afford that much. We think the community isn't gonna buy that in their judgment. So now we're putting them in a position of picking a solution that's gonna be a
So
different.
that's where the word choice. So we are not putting them in a position to pick. We are giving them a suite of options that they will continue to refine and develop. And however that comes out is part of the same story. It's not going to be a situation where they say, oh, we can't pick one of these, now we have to start over. The goal of this process, of this community engagement, and the way we've worked through the past year has been to provide flexibility. Flexibility for our educational options, flexibility for our financial options, and flexibility for the board.
Can I connect back? So Jeff, I understand your question, and it's part of the process contemplates exactly what you're describing. So the reason we're writing a report that actually covers all 8 models is we have to do as diligent as a job explaining why, what some of the pros and cons were of the things that we didn't put forward and recommend, because as additional information and analysis comes out, as the board does, for example, a quantitative survey to dig deeper into some of the things that they want to look at after we hand off our report, they can continue to benefit from the insights and all the work on those other models as well. And refinements may include, pulling one of those up or taking parts of those things. There's unlimited flexibility in terms of how the board can use the work. What's important for us to do is to say clearly how the analysis and the community engagement led us to those conclusions at this point in time.
Yeah.
New information and new pieces will always come forward, so we can't be scared about that. That we have to accept that's part of this organic process. We're writing a report which is really happening at a snapshot in time. And so it has to reflect all the information available now.
And we didn't present to the community such a range of project cost options that there is a dramatic difference. What we found based on the basic things that we as a group thought were important to have led us to a place where the numbers weren't extremely different.
But it
But the
could be
board
any
can,
variable.
but it could be any variable, and
It
the
doesn't
board
matter
can
what
look at
variable.
all of that and do something differently.
Helen?
So the way, and you've spoken with Link, so you understand this, how this, why we're using this format.
They spoke to the group on Monday.
But I wasn't here. And then I know
Right,
you
so
had
they
any
were
other.
here and they let
So
them
I'd
use
like you to
Monday.
counsel me, let's say I'm to identify 3 that I think are most worthy of the board's further development, but only if some of the adjustments we've talked about, and I'll be just literal, A, with a renovated Northwood, B, with a ECC back here to bring down the development cost of the project. How would, if that was how I favored it, and really didn't favor it otherwise, because I didn't believe, I wanted to favor something with that higher price tag. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, so
Can
we
you
had a lot of
counsel
those
me how to
conversations.
vote my
Yeah.
yeses?
We did have a lot of those conversations Monday night, and I'm sorry that you weren't here for those,
Yeah, I'll
but
reiterate what kind of Link uses for it. Basically,
Yeah.
this is a facilitation tool. If we're gonna get from here to a report, we gotta know how long that road is. So if you have a question about A, then that's one of your question marks. Two question marks.
So if I only would want it, if I love the plan, but with a certain, a distinctive
that might be a
change,
question mark.
it cannot be the yes. If I don't love it in its form, in its
Correct,
present
yes.
format, it can't receive my yes.
Yeah, that's a question mark. And later on, we're gonna get into pros and cons, right?
So we need to vote. So
Yes, so let's go ahead and do this.
I know, I
So
voted.
So guys, let's, if you haven't already filled it out, let's take a few minutes to fill it out.
3, 3, and 2.
Reiterate.
3, 3, 2.
Melissa?
Just one point, this is
Okay.
just an informal process to gauge support.
Yes, this is not a vote. You're just filling out your thoughts on 3 yeses and do whatever you want with the rest of them.
Please repeat for people who want to know. How many yeses, how many no's, and how many nays?
3 yeses and
Say 3 people.
Whatever you want.
Many no's or question
only
marks?
up to 2 maybes.
Oh.
No more than 2 maybes. No more than 3 yeses. No more than 2 maybes.
Oh, all right.
Here, there's a ton.
You need another?
We have like, you need to answer, you were told to
How many times?
It's an Australian vote, whatever you want.
It's not a vote. Don't get it. It's not under.
We don't start by names.
Anyone
Come on, that worked.
That was so
Totally
right.
worked.
Oh, like half hour is made on that. Tabulate.
I don't push that.
Right at the end.
Model Q one, you guys.
No, they're just like, it's not gonna happen.
You're not required, you do not have to do 3 yeses. You can only do 1 yes.
Yeah, you have an unlimited.
You are not
number.
required to do 3 yeses, I can tell you that.
And you can leave some blanks.
I heard Model Q's winning anyway.
No, they're just too broad.
Is this that you're a factor? No, they recommended 3.
It's barely your favorite. But they didn't put buildings.
They recommended 3 configurations and then faster, we all put our heads down, that was the problem.
No, it's not a vote. This is just a taking of the temperature so we can move on.
It's just taking the temperature, we're gonna take the temperature faster.
It's
We just put our heads down and then-
I don't know, Mark, I don't know. Yeah, we did that.
Alex, how amazing.
Yeah.
Did you get
Okay,
No, no,
anybody still have?
There's 2 weeks old.
I'm
Okay,
not done.
okay.
And the third one was to have
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about that too.
Probably nickel.
Yeah, what did you see? Everything, really?
Yeah, this was.
I wonder if everybody else see everything? Is it always there? Yeah. Or you don't have like, oh, I don't know, nobody can
Because, that's what I said, every time it shakes, it's another.
I went to South Africa. South Africa.
Something else I would just like to clarify, oh, Lori?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something, and it's kind of just repeating what Ralph said, but I think it's really an important point. That when we present this to the board and we put it in our report, I think that we have to, everything has to be backed up by data and analysis that we
100%.
collected.
Yes.
I think that's really an important, I mean, the community and this committee has gone out of their way and given a lot of their time, especially the community, we've asked a lot of them. And I think that's just a really important point that you mentioned.
I
but
agree,
wanted-
I agree.
wanted to-
And that, we talked about this quite a bit in the very beginning, but I don't know if we covered it as much recently, that we are representatives of the community in the sense that we are representing the feedback that we got from them. And less so in the sense of I represent the street that I live on, more in the sense of we represent the community. And that's something that it's, when we get down to actually, talking about what we're putting forward and moving things forward, it's an important thing to remember what our role is here as representatives of the community.
And I really feel like if we haven't covered in this survey, and this is just me speaking personally, I feel like it came up a bit before. I worry a lot about people representing others, what they think others will vote on. If we don't have feedback on substance, I don't think we should put it in there. I think it's emotion and opinion. If it isn't backed up by substance that we generated here,
Then it's
probably
conjecture.
shouldn't be there.
Yeah, then it's
It
conjecture.
is.
Because we've done a lot of work to get actual feedback.
Yeah.
So we don't want to add in a lot of hearsay.
On the data, I was thinking about our spirited conversation from Monday about what's in the data and what's not in the data. And so I went back and I read the Post-it note stuff from June. And I think it's fair to say everything's in the data. I mean, there's a lot there. And so I think it's, I think one thing I noticed is that what we did with the Post-it note data is we sort of put it into three categories, like check plus and check minus and neutral or something like that. And we gave sort of a net overall promoter score, like a +1, a -0.3, whatever it is. But what I think that didn't get to the point where we sort of clustered the quality of the comments. Because within each plan, there's probably a bunch of different feelings that are represented, a bunch of points that are represented, that just sort of saying, I like this plan, don't like this plan, doesn't capture all the nuances of sort of how do people feel, aside from saying I like A and don't like B.
There
So I
was
think
a
there's sort
lot
of
more
one.
of that richness in the exit survey and in the focus group.
Yeah, and so I think my point is going to be is that I think we collected a lot of data, but I think it's also in my opinion, it almost feels like too much data. Like there's so much here. It's hard to get my head around the entire thing.
So here's the point. If you want to support or refute anything, you can find a quote somewhere that somebody says.
Or 3 or 5 or 10, yeah.
So I think what you want to look for, and this is where Lincoln again was kind of reaffirming this, what are the strong signals that came across in focus groups, and in the survey, and in the community engagement, and in the exit poll? What are the things that we really can say? And that's where it comes back to the report structure too, where we say what are the things we really feel are very evident, our recommendations, and then kind of process them. So that we'll get to that.
There are strong themes that come out across the board.
We have to agree that the theme was strong. We have to agree what the feedback was. That's how we keep really a group product and not, let's put every single item that we think anyone might care about into the report. It has to be something that represents the team, not just what every single person wants to put in.
And that's what's nice about having Link, or somebody like Link, or Jeff Andreas, or whatever, help us with the analysis, so that we're not doing the analysis that they are. So that when they come back and say, here are what we see as themes, based on that, they don't even have clarification on which models are what, they deliberately try not to know that information, so that when they look at themes, they can really identify them unbiased.
Well, and just to that point, I think that the fact that there haven't been any major deviations, even as we've given greater detail and gotten more specific as we've moved on in this process, there hasn't been any kind of like big shocker at any stage, whether it's from the survey, the forums, the focus groups, and I think that's in a way what we were looking for, right? And in the process that we're doing right now, like, is there any huge surprise?
Something else I'd like to say just about if we end up, and we hope that we do, we're planning on ending up at a vote tonight, for the people who are not here tonight and are going to be here next week, and vice versa, that next week will be an opportunity to ratify that vote. Those people will also have a say if they are not here tonight and will be here next Thursday. We just need to get the report moving.
Is that the 6th? Is that where we landed?
Yes, it landed on the 6th, yeah. It's just because it's a holiday week, we don't want the process to look fractured. Like, we realize that by making the action item during the holiday week, it sort of, it doesn't ring as true as doing it on a regular work week that we have a disconnect of people who are here and who are not.
You ready?
Are we ready?
We're ready.
All right.
Ready.
You want to do this or you want me to?
Go ahead.
All right.
I don't have a memory.
Wait, give them a second to do A through H and then yes, no session.
Yeah, how do you want to work the actions?
Yeah, so-
Do you want to go A, yes,
Do
maybe
like
no?
last time.
Yeah, last time we all made our own list of A through H, and then we went across the top with yes, no, the same structure as the form.
Have to remember the alphabet.
Right?
A, 2 yes, 10 no, 7 maybe. B, 15 yes, 3 no, 2 maybe. C, 10 yes, 7 no, 3 maybe. 10, 7 no, 3 maybe.
Same as last time.
Model D, 18 yes, 3 no, no maybe. Model E, 12 yes, 6 no, 1 maybe. Model F, 2 yes, 15 no, 2 maybe. Model G, 1 yes, 16 no, 2 maybe. Model H, 4 yes, 12 no, 3 maybe.
Could you do B again? I'm sorry.
Sure, 15 yes, 3 no, 2 maybe.
We have the files if anybody wants to audit them.
And these are quite consistent with the way that the numbers have.
Very
The comments that you put on them were not tabulated. Some people made it an essay question instead of a multiple.
Also, some people did mark down, instead of a question mark, they wrote in maybe, so it wasn't many, I thought 1 or 2 people.
But you still counted it as a
I still
question.
counted it as a
Oh,
question
okay.
mark, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so it looks like we ended up real similar to where we were Monday night, which is good. That means we are consistent, that we are, as a group, sort of moving in a direction, which is good. Again, it looks like we've sort of coalesced around B, D, and E with C as a strong interest. So from there, I think that one thing that we need to think about, and Raph mentioned this earlier, that while our favorite may not be moving forward, that this is a group effort, and there are opportunities to send in your thoughts. So one thing we talked about doing was I could send back out the slides that I showed last week or the week before that had sort of a recap of feedback themes, and then you guys can all send thoughts of additional pros and cons to me, because I think what we've had, or to John, however we want to do it, but we've discussed a great deal the pros and cons of all of these models through the heat map process, through preparing for the forums and the focus groups. So I think it might take a lot of time, and we've already made the effort to go back over all 8. And what we want to really cover for the report is kind of the key pros and cons, or the key highlights, and include those in the report. So if that works for everyone at this point in terms of the, maybe we'll talk about the 4 that rose to the top and what light those are in, and then if there are further comments on the other ones in terms of pros and cons, that you can send those to me.
Yeah, one thing that we've talked about, I guess it was Monday, it seems like last week, but I guess it was Monday, was starting out the report with a few points that aren't model specific, but that we all agree on, like all-day kindergarten, okay? And that the community seems to really go for it and all agree with. And I think that and it's up to you, but do you think that it's worthwhile to talk about those first and get those positive points first, and then?
Yeah, so the structure of the report, and again, if you weren't here, what Link recommended was starting with sort of a preamble. We all believe the things that were like the basis of our work in developing models, things that we've talked about, things that we've researched, the things that we feel were important in every model, the things that we all know we agree on and that we included in every model. as sort of our preamble. And then the middle section would be our recommendations and, why, the thinking behind them, what it is about those models that caused us to want to move them forward. And that includes the community feedback, that includes the educational rationale, that includes all the different pieces that we've talked about. And then in that section would also include why we didn't move other ones forward. So that's where we would include our thoughts, our pros and cons on the models that we're not recommending. And then the third section would be recommendations for process and path forward, touching on implementation, suggestions, what we think are the things that still need to be considered about each of the ones we're recommending. What are the things that we recognize as things that need to be considered, so that we would give the board also some ideas to move on with there as part of the process.
If you think about it, it's kind of a microcosm of what we've done. So we spent an awful lot of time up front identifying those important things, and I think one informative part of that is, what do we choose to put in every one of these models? Right, there's things that we baked into every one, and we tried to make it apples to apples as far as we could. And so we need to sort of codify all those things that we thought were really important as a conclusion of our work. And then the description of the models is incredibly important, and as I said before, as important to say kind of what were the pros and cons of things we're not recommending moving forward from 2.0's perspective, because there may be a lot of insights and pieces there that are going to be important to the board as much as what we can tell them about the things that we specifically do recommend that they go forward with. And then in terms of what the process can look like going forward, we've certainly been working a lot with the community, so we want to ensure that continuity there. And one thing that Link said that really made an impression on me was, they said very often where things like this fall apart is you can do a fantastic job as a citizens group, but things can fall apart where if the handoff isn't good. If we don't have a really good dialogue with the board and a really good kind of handoff process where it's very seamless and continuous and continue to engage the community and continues to look like each step that we take is a step that they could anticipate and follow how we got there, that's where the whole thing can fall apart if we don't do a good job with that. So that's why it's really important to spend time on that process going forward piece as well.
Yeah. Okay, so.
Helen, you're looking
No, not at all.
reflective, okay?
No,
I'll put my spectacles
it's a
on.
good
So
statement.
do we want to just go through at a high level and identify the key? Oh,
So-
sorry,
I was
Dennis,
just going
yes.
to add to what you just said, Ralph, that speaking as one board member, I hope you all aren't going to disappear after you send us a report, and that we'll be able to have some ongoing conversation about, whatever we start thinking about as we read.
So I think it's great to hear that. I think that if you all have an opportunity to speak before the 18th, if you can, as a group, kind of pull into focus what that engagement might look like, it would be helpful for the people around the table. I mean,
This is what I was saying last time, if there's any way you even have a kind of shared understanding of what the next steps could be, that can be released to the community around the same time as the report, that's the smoothest possible handoff.
I would
This is
also
gonna
say
happen
that
outside.
is in the best interest of, I heard the phrase ambitious schedule a lot last week when I spoke to all of you. It is an ambitious schedule. That's a great way to kind of stick with an ambitious schedule, I think, is maintaining that continuity and that exchange and, instead of having a lag with regards to next steps. So it would be really helpful to hear from all of you.
So a quick point, you talk about pros and cons, I'm totally on that. But I want to include in the word con, if this is a problem with it and we make this change, it would no longer be a con. So when we start to talk about potential changes that would make it a more palatable
Would it be an X con?
option. So it's possible, but it'd be within that sort of, when you say pros and cons, let's include potential changes to make it better in that.
Right, so that's also related to what Dan was saying.
Right.
That we do want to include that in the report.
But we won't
because
be
the
doing
creative-
that refinement anymore.
Yeah,
There's like a
I
creative
just want to make
enhancement.
clear that that's where that would belong.
That's where that would belong, yes. The creative process does not come to a screeching halt. We understand that there are modifications and enhancements and ways to have some things work better or ways to have them cost less, or, that there are modifications, and we want to be clear that our report is not like a final report. Our report is, like Raf said, it's a snapshot of where we are now, based on the work that we've done over the past year and the community engagement that we've had. That's what our report will reflect, but it's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
This might be hopeless. Is there time to schedule a workshop before the 18th to work with the board on next steps?
That's up to the board.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, they've already scheduled a special meeting to discuss other things they have going on, so I don't know what the flexibility is.
Well, so we've got a meeting on the 11th. I think you guys have a meeting also. We're meeting at 6. Part of that meeting is to interview another search firm, but part of that meeting there'll be an agenda point to discuss next steps. So, there's a timeline being worked on, and so it is, we will at that meeting discuss sort of where we think this process is going.
Okay, good.
I mean,
good.
and it will be recorded, so even if we bleed over and you guys meet on the 11th, you'll be able to watch the report.
We won't crash for public comment, don't worry.
You can, please do, actually.
But I mean, it might be.
And on that note of process, we are also going to be developing a letter, like we talked about last week, that kind of talks about how we are transitioning from one phase into the next, and we will hopefully have that also signed by the administration cabinet and 2.0, as we did with the first letter.
Do you anticipate delivering the report on the 18th, not before the 18th, right?
Well, so technically, technically for the board, we need to submit the materials ahead. So the presentation is on the 18th, but our deadline is,
It's gonna be the 12th or the 13th of that week.
yeah.
That Wednesday.
And that's what our 11th meeting is. 'cause
Yeah,
we
so
do
at
that.
our 11th
It actually
meeting-
goes until the 12th.
Bring
So-
a lot of coffee.
Right, and that's where we realized in looking at the calendar that we need to have our vote tonight, because, and that's why we introduced that, and we have the action item on there because,
We need to have an actionable agreement
yes,
that we can work on this group of models that we want to start
that
writing
the
around.
report can get into motion.
And by writing, I mean, for those of you who weren't here the other night, I think that when we talked about the fact that this doesn't need to be like a massive tome with lots of, we've delivered all of our information over the last year in PowerPoint, and I think it's really effective. I also think it bears mentioning that while this is definitely a report to the board, it also needs to be accessible to the community at large.
Right.
And for that reason, I think that the format of
We should invite
producing
attendance.
slides.
We should reach out for attendance, public attendance for that.
Well, okay, so we did touch on that briefly with Link
Oops.
today. We're hoping that as many of us can be there as possible, but we'd like to include people to watch it live, but to invite actual attendance would be a lot of bodies in the room. So
I always say the more the merrier,
Less,
so we have plenty of
if
room.
you have to move to the high school gym,
Whatever it takes, I mean, when people want to attend, we love it. The more they know, the better. The more
right, I think we
fun
will
so-
already have a built-in group of people that will attend because they want to, and then we will have all of us. I don't know if actually reaching out to,
Either way is good.
I don't know.
We're happy
It
to have.
seems like
got
we need to
Maybe
be
that's
more
not an
focused.
agenda item or discussion now, but nothing focuses people like coming to the end. So it is an opportunity.
It's not the end. This
Sorry,
is a snapshot of where we are.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's an important distinction though, because
No, you're correct, it's not the end. That is the right way to
it
characterize
may feel that way for some of
It's a
us who have been like.
significant, it's a kickoff, it's a handoff, it's something
Right.
significant.
Right.
So it's not a bad time to start it's just somehow very possible people are still walking around going, what are they doing? What's up with the schools? And it's going to be such a pointed presentation. I mean, and a lot of people will never watch that well, that's all, it's just a thought. It's not even a well-considered one, so you can take it for
Well,
what
no, it is well considered. It did come up in our call today.
Well, no, I'm saying on my part, it isn't. It's just I thought of the enthusiasm of it, and I generally can see positive things happening from people dialing in and getting connected and on board as soon as possible.
Right. So Nicholas, I don't know, do you want to?
No, I mean, I asked a question on the call today, so it's something that I was thinking about. So, you know, it's interesting, and definitely, I mean.
Something to think about.
Yeah, something to think about.
Yeah, I don't know how that impacts like our venue or our, you know, I don't know how that impacts the,
We'll make room. If people want to show up, we'll make room. We got the gym, we got fireside room, we got this room. Please, anybody who wants to come, please.
we could set up a screen in Sunset Park.
I'll do it.
And show movies.
We're driving.
It's like, it's in Martin Hall.
So the length of a report thing, you know, Mark Twain once said, if I had more time, I would have wrote it shorter. So, you know, I think a shorter report would be the most deliverable.
Yeah, always.
Okay, so let's talk, since we're talking about the report, let's go ahead and see where we are on people who would like to work on that. So we have the 3 sections, basically, of this report, and Raph, why don't you talk about how you want to, we were talking about OMA and how that impacts it. So we, and with the holiday, we do have some complications in pulling this thing together. So we were envisioning next week as a working meeting, and thinking that we would have a few people that we can delegate tasks to. This is how we put together the second brochure, and then everybody fed their piece to Nicholas or to one person, so that then that person could put it together, rather than having a dialogue, which does not work with OMA. So we can't use a Google Doc. We can't just all type into a Google Doc. Like, it has to be something where people submit their piece, they take on a piece and submit that piece, and it gets pulled together.
The key point is, meeting as a group of this size to try to write the document together is bananas. So we have to, it's no one's favorite way to write anything, but taking chunks and doing a good job kind of on that piece, we'll try to make the work packages as explicit as possible, and then assembling it, and then when the group actually gets together, they'll have a chance to read, each of you will have had a chance to read the kind of skeleton piece together, and then the comments and everything will make more sense, because it'll be actually about a thing. It's editing. You can't write it as a group very effectively, but you can.
Right.
Provide consolidated.
And like, we can set up just a basic template so that everybody is working in the same format. We can do it that way, or we could, you know.
Because we talk about sending it in, and then they can send it back.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
What are the 3 sections again?
The preamble, where we talk about the things that we think are important to any plan that takes the district forward, the things that we all agree on. For example, the easiest one's full-day K. That's in all of our plans. It's something we've talked about from the start. It's something that we have comparative analysis with other districts. You know, we'll pull some of our graphics from our brochures for the different pieces. So that would be that first part, sort of establishing the baseline of what we all agree to be true.
These truths that we hope we thought of.
Correct. And then.
Can I just clarify? Are we presenting those as kind of like, not to say that nothing's off the table, but are we like, I mean, full day kindergarten is like an easy one. Like there's basically, I don't remember anybody in the data, maybe it was in there somewhere, one person was like, no, we don't need full day kindergarten. But like that seemed to be like really straightforward. Some of the other items, especially when we started to talk about like ways to kind of like cut costs or to reduce costs, they came up as a little bit more negotiable. Is the tone of that preamble going to be like, obviously this was our baseline that we went forward with all the models, but based on feedback that we got, based on the data we collected, some of these were less of a priority for a group of community members than others.
I would suggest, so this is an example of things where, again, based on the feedback and the work that we did. So part of what we didn't do is test. So you mentioned some things have trade-off potential, right? If you're in a value engineering environment, or other reasons, they're not all equal in the minds of all people.
Right.
But What we haven't done is test those things in context. So it's unrealistic for us and not very productive for us to try to really, in my opinion, to force rank them
Right.
very strictly within the categories of things that we thought were important. I think ultimately what's important is when you start putting them in the context of specific models, specific costs, that's kind of part of what you have to go to in another quantitative survey that the board is going to run and other refinement
That's the
process
next
going
phase.
forward. Because we've tried that for a long time, Mark, trying to say, well, I remember we used to go back and forth before about, well, which ones do we think are essential and how do we prioritize them? And you kind of get caught up in that lack of context.
Or which configurations actually lend themselves to
Right, or even
a
specific
bifurcation
buildings,
of some of
if you're trying to break it down into.
Well, I definitely wouldn't want to get into that granular level of this,
Right.
but I just think about like, you know, one of the items from here that like stuck out was like STEM classes, which wasn't really part of any of those things, but then like fire sprinklers. Like, that specific item came up as like a really high priority for a lot of people from like the
So
survey.
we know what the
like-
physical things are that we included in our cost components. So we know that we have those things built into our costs, and those are like the physical attributes of the building and the space allowances. Whereas things like STEM or, you know, the dual language program, different things are board-related, cabinet-related, things that are going to be decided by other people, but that, you know, we are interested in having more STEM opportunities, and we found that because we found that the data supports that, the community wants that. So we put that in there, but it's not something that we specifically costed out as what is the price of a STEM lab for this configuration. So, you know, it's a bucket of things that we believe are important to this district, you know, to be competitive and to move forward.
So like, would air conditioning be synonymous with full day K within this group? Like,
At
is
this
that-
stage.
At this stage, okay, so
In my
basically,
opinion, yes.
yeah, well, in my opinion too.
I'm
I just
thinking
would-
back to the fact sheets, and I actually went and pulled those up that we generated on the education subcommittee, and I think that that'll be a really useful point of reference for the preamble, because in the early months of this process, one of the reasons that we deviated from that original structure was that we realized the interplay between some of the educational objectives and kind of what a learning environment should feel like. And so I'm wondering, I mean, they're all on the Google Drive. It seems absurd to like add appendices to a PowerPoint presentation.
No, we're
but
gonna have to have a stack, and what we're gonna do.
additional
So-
resources.
Yeah, so what Link
They
suggested
said
to make
all of
it,
this.
yes, so what Link suggested to make it user-friendly is, that is a slide that lists all of these items with where to get them.
Yep.
So it's not that we're going to
So
have
it's
them
an
as part of the
appendice.
presentation, it's that our appendices is all the things that informed our work, and they are accessible here.
But just as important, and I want to connect kind of Mark what you were saying with some other comments that, like Ronnie, what you were saying. We're not writing new content if we don't have to write new content. I mean, this is a report about the whole process. This is not, and now here's some more ideas. I mean, this is pulling from all of the fact sheets. There's a tremendous amount of work, there's a tremendous amount of graphics and slides that have already been created.
Yeah.
So a lot of it, people will not have, there are going to be a lot of people that have never looked at any of it.
Right.
But they might look at one board presentation, they can see that the board is looking at about specific recommendations, they're likely to look at that. So it's actually really important that we not lose those things. But the process you're describing is the report writing process, and it takes more than one mind to kind of come up with the best way to balance these different things.
So Mark's point, you know, we all talk about full-day kindergarten is the obvious thing. We plan around the inclusion of full-day kindergarten. Everything else, I can't think of anything, maybe, I apologize, it's been a long day, but everything else is something that is a component of the structure. So adding
That's what I was
indoor air
trying to
quality, adding, those things are things that can be removed or added or enhanced or changed. The only thing that we've really done as a given across all the models is inclusion of space for full-day kindergarten. That's it, listen.
Right.
Even
But-
Aaron, even
full-day K
well,
could be.
dual language is included, but there's various ways of delivering.
But I would also argue that full-day K
something.
could be a variable that's scaled in as well. It doesn't mean just if you want a full-day K, doesn't mean it has to be there day one. If the board needs to scale it in, it could be a scaled in item.
But we also have studied all those things, and we have context around them as why we included them as components, so those
No,
aren't
all
things
I'm
that
saying is
we have
across,
context to provide to the board, that we're
across
not just saying, or not, you know,
I understand, but we're trying to figure out, what it is, the given in our assumptions. The only givens in our assumptions is full day kindergarten and it's just reiterate, no language in one middle school.
And fewer buildings.
Spread space.
And fewer buildings.
and we have fact sheets on that, you know, we have fact sheets on
Everything else is something that is
sectioning and buildings and.
But I don't think that area is about trying to identify the scale of what ultimately ends up.
That's what I'm trying to get to.
It's just,
my point.
we all agree in the idea, the theory, and the.
And we have reasons for it, that's what we want to be able to
And we've
to
tried to
share in
create
our report.
configurations that allow for
it to be
it.
there. What scale any one of those points could be ultimately implemented? That's the
I just want to
flexibility
make
for
sure,
the board.
we've never actually done a straw poll on any of those in this group, and that's why I just want to make sure there isn't
Do you want to
something.
vote some more?
I don't, yeah, I just don't want someone to be like, well, I never.
But we
heard that.
did agree to include certain components in all of our models. We did agree on some of those things as we worked through the process of refining the model,
So the assumption is that whatever component we put into every model with those 8, that's an agreement that we had.
And that's what we presented at the forums, it was in the presentation for the forums too.
It's not a bad starting point.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that there's nobody
It's not-
out there
it's not that
saying,
you
well,
can't-
wait, we didn't
you can't
actually
debate it,
vote
but-
on it or have a straw poll on it.
We put a lot of work into that.
Yeah.
We did some kind of consensus stuff early on.
The blue group over there has been both with their hands up for a while.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, the one thing that is throughout the models, I think should be in the preamble, is we wanted robust sections. In other words, we don't want one, school to have one section of 16 kids like is it right now. So, and I think that flows through every model that we did, and I think that needs to be in the preamble.
I agree.
I think one thing that I'll do, guys, I think I will just resend out the fact sheets. I think there probably is a gap that we haven't looked back at them for a while, and we have, I think we have one about sectioning, right?
We sure do.
Because we were going to, so we were going to make the language more digestible because it was a little bit formal, it's about sections, and we realized that that might not.
It wasn't the most accessible for, and I think that when we were trying to convey things to the community at large, we realized that even understanding the distinction between how things work at the elementary level and with the middle level, it's not sectioning at the middle school level.
Right.
And so words like section and cohort, and then they were like, but what about the pods? So it got very challenging. Simplify. As I said, it's for the board, but it's also for the community.
And at that time, when we were doing the fact sheets, we were so careful with each word. We were trying very hard to just start getting things approved through the board and through our group. And now we've reached a point where we're all a little bit more comfortable just sort of chatting about things, but we need to go back and look at those and make sure they are digestible.
Can we just go ahead and read out or figure out exactly what we all agree on so we have an idea? Like I've gotten all-day kindergarten, space allowances are somewhat equal access to programs, fewer buildings, more than 2 sections per school, STEM labs, air conditioning, green construction. Those are the
Green
things-
construction?
Green. I actually came up with green construction.
Oh, well, I don't
because
remember
decided-
ever hearing that
The
before.
STEM labs are a little bit,
Green report.
No.
STEM labs.
Is she are you referring to the green report? No, you're referring to a certain approach to the construction?
No.
That was never anything 2.0.
Green reports.
We're not doing green certified.
Hey
Well, I
guys,
say we
I think what
already
we'd like to do, these are all great conversations, and we're all going to have a chance to take a look at what this group puts together, but I think we need to identify who's working on this. Dan?
No, I just wanted to comment with Julie, this is as a former 2.0 member, I don't think we ever agreed on certain things. I thought the reason we put everything in the models was we wanted to compare apples to apples in the models. And we did have a discussion about, and I did raise this question at one point, if we strongly believe something should be in there, should we even test it with the community? And the answer we got was, no one said, well, there are things we strongly agree that we should put in. We're going to test it with the community. So I don't know what that's worth, but I disagree with your point, Melissa, that there was some sort of common agreement about about air conditioning, for example.
Well, no, I think the agreement was that we were going to include them in the models.
Right,
So,
it is an
yeah.
apples to apples, but it wasn't an agreement that this is something important to be put in.
I come back to,
Okay.
It was
we've
to
got
find
the
a price
rigor,
point for
we've
it.
got the
Right.
rigor that we do, and at this point, if we don't have new information to guide the analysis, I feel that we can take it to a certain point, but I come back to the point about in context of a specific configuration. We haven't tested that, so I think that those trade-offs are
Well, and
important.
maybe it's more of just a presentation of the research we've done around that topic, rather than saying that we all agree that it's, this degree of importance, that it's more like, this is the research we've done around this topic. We included everything in the models to be consistent, but it is, up to the board to decide to what degree those things are implemented. Does that work?
I'd
I
like
think it's
to
better,
just
yeah.
say that, everybody, I hate to be a pessimist, but, the numbers that we're showing as the upper level and the lower level costs, as I understand it, you took 15% as a deviation, which apparently could be a contingency. Costs between now and the time that the referendum goes out, costs could also go up instead of more than the contingency would cover. So I think, what I'm saying is, I think it might be a mistake to say this is in the numbers. You could say we would like this to be included in the numbers, but when you get down to maybe getting to what the board thinks is a saleable referendum cost, you want to give yourself the flexibility to cut things out that you may not be able to afford.
But again, that's a different subject. So our report is based on the work that we have up until this point. So the numbers that we have up until this point include the same components for each model. So any work that is done after this snapshot in time about taking those things out or rearranging them or including different amounts or reducing those numbers is all done outside of this report. This report is a snapshot in time of the work that we've done. So it's not going to, it's not.
Can I?
Yes, help me.
Yeah, so I think, and I think we're cycling on this a couple times.
We are, yeah.
So what we did was we put in everything that we thought would represent an excellent execution of that concept. We put those numbers in front of the community as a not to exceed number. So we're not gonna change that, that's what we've done, okay?
That's what
And
we've
as Darren very rightly pointed out, with the exception of some of the space and physical configuration choices that we've made, much of this is scalable and can be dialed up to a very substantial degree or down, depending on where the ultimate kind of decision comes out. So I think it's in the writing of the report. A lot of this, I think, is actually going to be more satisfying as a discussion when you actually see it on paper and you say, okay, I agree
React to it.
that this reflects kind of how we want this to come away. So it doesn't come across as this is the only way you can execute it if that's not true.
Right.
It doesn't come across as tying the hands of further decision making because we presented it as only one way to do it.
Right.
It's in the nuances of how you actually capture that information.
It is really brilliant the way you formatted this. Actually, it was absolutely brilliant because 2.0 was never going to design a building or any building or engineer it down or engineer it up. It was completely never within our abilities or any way appropriate. So that snapshot in time level across these is so fair and so brilliant for everybody to take a look and process.
Blake that came up with that. So I think we have to stick with that process and say, this is a process that has been proven to work, so thank you for the feedback on the process. And I think that what we need now is the people who are going to do the heavy lifting and create this animal that we're then going to go poke and prod until we like the way it looks.
What are the other two sections of the report, so I know what to
Take it right.
We've got the preamble and
You
then.
just talk about them without discussion.
Preamble.
Okay, preamble,
We did that one.
options, recommendations and not. Process and path forward implementation. Those are our three.
Now, you had some
Wait, say it again.
Can you go through that one more time?
So preamble,
Options, just slow, slow.
Am I being unclear?
what's
I don't
that?
know, am I talking too
You're fast.
fast?
You're talking
Intuitive
fast.
options, explain options.
Okay, ref.
Preamble, options. Here's a suite of options that we recommend based on our view for further analysis. Here's another group of options that we've done extensive analysis and testing in the community. Here's things that are good, and here's things that we think got less good feedback or looked less good. The third part, I apologize, is here's what we think the process, this is coming back to how do we ensure that continuity? And no, Bennett, we're not gonna go away, maybe not all the people, maybe the people that you would rather not go away will go away, and you'd rather stay, but we're not all going away.
There's always that risk.
And it's essentially, what are our thoughts about how to connect the dots?
Right, just to that point, the third stage is probably gonna be one of the most critical and nuanced sections of this whole thing. The other ones are gonna probably be fairly obvious and fairly clear, and, you know, how you write some of that nuance, that last section is gonna be very clear.
And it's not the whole process, it's things that, so the way Josh put this, or Michael, the head of Link, put it on Monday, I liked a lot, he said, here's things that the process, we believe the process should include going forward. We're not designing the whole process because there's many other parties and the board is ultimately responsible for the whole process, but here's things that we as 2.0 in the course of our year of work and engaging the community believe the process and recommend the process should include going forward. And one of those recommendations you already heard was, hey, we had a process where we wrote a joint letter to the community from the board and the administration in 2.0. We'd like to do that again to help them understand how we're transitioning. Lots of other things like that. So, Julie?
My only concern is if the board is developing how they think things should go forward, and we're developing in our own little silo how we are recommending things to go forward, if they don't merge or if they conflict in any way, that's going to look bad.
Well, that's why I suggested that it would be helpful to hear from the board prior to the delivery of the report, how they envision the sort of ongoing.
But ours shouldn't be that nuanced that we're trying to hands the board.
So maybe if you define like a timeline that our process or recommendation goes to, and then we don't recommend something beyond that, and now it's just in their ballpark.
Yeah, it's not that we're gonna represent, or say that by September you should be here and all that, it's not about that, it's
But
ideas, themes, concepts to hopefully include and what is the foundation of that rationale.
And that
Grounded
may
in this
be-
data, it's grounded in that research.
Yeah.
When is your meeting to talk about process?
The 11th.
The 11th?
But
We need
so-
to get this written by,
The 11th.
see, that just worries me. I don't know if that
Well,
worries
no,
anybody else here.
if there's any significant change, we can alter it, we'll have a day or two to alter that, but I'm not anticipating us to be that far apart.
Well, or that's maybe, we do the first part that John described, but the actual piece about path forward, we include as like one of the last slides, and we hear back from them after their meeting. Because this is as much a presentation to the community as it is to the board. The board's here, they know what we're talking about, but when we actually make our presentation, it's as much for the community, so that if we have the slide in there that just recaps what they decide they want, then.
Julie has a good point. People are gonna hang their hat on certain things we recommended and don't wanna make the board subject to criticism because they have ideas or process different than what we could have anticipated.
It's going to be grounded in the data that we have. If the data changes or alters, Mr. Shrek.
And there's an art to writing these kinds of things. This was originally a point for the preamble, but it's also with respect to the process. We want to avoid unnecessary and inappropriate specificity. It's one thing to say there needs to be a committee with 15 people that meets every 2 weeks that's advising the board. It's another thing to say that it's important for the board to consult with the community and to continue to engage the involved members of 2.0 who want to continue.
Right. The language is not so granular as to give them instructions at all.
Yeah,
The
I mean,
language is.
We have to keep that in mind both for the preamble and for
Very
the
good point.
recommendations and for discussing the process, that this has to be something that allows for flexibility going forward.
I think that's a great point, and I think the other point too is, the first time that, when you present it to us, it'll be the first time you present it to us, and the first time we'll be responding to it. So at that point, it doesn't need to be final too, because there could be some feedback in the give and take that, tweaks that a little bit as well, so, but yeah, I think.
You mean when we give it to you ahead
On
of
the
the
18th,
meeting and
yeah.
then there are a few days there?
You're absolutely right.
Right,
It's
thank
extremely
you.
important that
Yeah.
you're not coming across like a prisoner exchange in Berlin on a bridge.
Right, exactly.
Right, it's just a continuation.
It's a continuation, and it's still, yes, some I'm not aware of any prisoners.
But I guess I'm just wondering, is the board allowed to send, individual board members send their individual viewpoint of what process might be going forward to John? And he can compile that without names associated to it.
I would think that's practical at this point. I think it's better for you guys to come up with your report, and if there are things that we want to discuss at that meeting on the 18th, that's the opportunity for some feedback.
It's a good feeling.
But you can
I think
also
it's an incredibly good feeling, positive discussion that we have on that. It's very
That's
right.
up.
Right.
It's not a, like, you must wear silly hats on Tuesday kind of a thing.
No, I like that idea. Yeah.
I think you can also discuss it tonight with, or next Thursday, with a bunch of board members in the room, and we're really limited in terms of comment. I mean,
We can all talk about this now. We can't talk about it among ourselves between now and the next meeting.
well, that's right, we
So-
can talk about it now, although I
Yeah.
think we have to be a little bit careful that we're not really here to deliberate as a board
Yeah.
about something you put to us as a board, but yeah, I mean, Alex said it very simply and plainly, thank you.
And I don't think we want to have undue influence on this either. I mean, this is your report, it's based on the work you guys have done as a report to us. But yeah, I mean, if there's some questions that can be answered at this point.
I think we kind of approach it, so I like the idea of soliciting comment or having a chance to chat informally, and I think that ultimately though, the tone that we strike, and I think the people who volunteer for this particular section have to understand this, is one about constructive suggestions based on observations directly from our work of things that we thought went well or things that in the opinion of Link or in our dialogue we felt would be important to continue. But they're not, we're not laying out a process. Again, to come back to Michael's comment, we're suggesting elements we think the process should include.
And towards that end, sorry, someone mentioned that there had been like a Google Doodle or something about who was interested, and I would like to ignore that because there were not enough people who were prepared to write the report, and at the time that was circulated, we didn't have a sense of the time frame or the format or anything, so I'd like to ask that question.
I'd like to hold those people's feet to the fire, Ronnie, I have a different opinion on that.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get
Yeah,
this,
zero
let's go
right.
ahead and get this
No
put
pressure,
together, because we still need to talk about a couple things before we get to our vote, so, we need to get this piece of, the conversation.
I'll be like a ringer and do whatever needs to get done.
Okay, why don't you and Raph each pick, a section and lead that section, and whoever wants to work with you?
I'll do the close. I like the close idea, what do you think?
Are you gonna try to keep the report group 7 and under?
I think they can be open. I mean,
Unless you want it
does that, let me ask something, friends. Is having open meetings for this a barrier to anyone's participation? Like, is there any reason at this point that we shouldn't be doing this in public?
Not that we shouldn't, but it's that things need to be delegated out so people can do the work from home and then send it to a central person. Like
You
it
can
needs
do
to
the work
be-
from home and send it to a
'cause we
central
can't-
person, as long as decisions aren't made.
Correct, and they go to one central person, it's not a
Is
conversation.
that right, John? From the rest of the committee? Are you talking the rest of the committee send ideas to?
No, the report group, so that they are able to work on it, without being at a
As
table
long
here.
as you don't get into a back and forth.
Right, as long as it's not a back and forth.
Well, how big is your
How do you
group?
not have a back and forth?
You'd have to have back and forth if you're, how big is your group? Because if your group isn't big, then you don't run into that.
But that's what she said.
Can we get a show of hands overall, like, forget about, like,
We talked about this.
not,
So why don't we discussed this earlier, so why don't we run through what we actually were gonna propose? Go ahead.
Oh, I go ahead?
Yeah.
No,
So it's under 7.
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that we were going to have just 2 or 3 people on each category, and it would be under 7 across the board, so that it, 7, we can have 7, so that it conforms with OMA,
And this is the approach we took for both, or at least the second mailer.
the second mailing. Yeah.
And it seemed to work fairly well, as long as you have that central person that collects, analyzes.
Yeah, and then we did conference calls. We did calls and.
And what are the working dates that you think people will be working together? What are the dates? They're after the 4th, they're after the holiday, Can you kind
I
of
don't-
identify what days?
We
those-
only have a couple meetings planned, so
No,
this needs to be people
that
doing this
volunteer
work on their own
by-
time.
This is homework.
It comes back to the people who are volunteering to work that out.
Right,
But
right.
what's the
It has
date
to
you
be
want
done
it
by-
done by? The 11th.
The 11th.
No, it's gotta be before the
Yeah,
11th in
you
order
gotta
to be
review it as a-
compiled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's gotta be done by the 6th.
But that can be, the compilation can be ongoing too, but yeah. Mhm.
It's gonna happen soon. If you volunteer, you're gonna be doing it very
Yeah,
soon.
you need to be available, you need to be available in the next week and a half to work on this project.
7 people.
7 people, and Ronnie and Raph are 2 of them. Mark? We have a show, let's get a show of hands and see if we are within our numbers.
I'm gonna be gone for some of the time, that's the only reason
That's why
I'm not
I'm
raising
asking
my
the
hand.
dates
We don't have to
too.
have reasons you're not, I mean, we know that everybody would contribute if they had the time, like I'm also not one of the 7.
I have the time, I just physically may not be in town.
But just
But you don't need to be physically in town if we're doing these sub-7.
Well, that's what I was trying to understand. These
Okay.
little groups will not meet together to work?
They can or cannot, depends on what they have. Under
They have calls.
Your family will love you if you do this while on vacation.
That's fine.
So raise your hand if you are interested, see, make sure we're not
Yeah, guys, I
overstaffing
mean,
it.
everybody will have the opportunity to provide input, but we just need to put together that core report team who has the time to
The grunts.
the grunt. Hands up and keep
Wants
them
to
up.
do grunt.
Yeah.
I don't think I can do it the next week.
Okay, including Ralph and Ronnie?
You have 12.
Including Ralph and Ronnie? Okay. 2 groups? Okay, can we do 2 groups, John?
Wait a minute, but there's 3 sections,
No, because you
so.
can't collectively work on the report as a report writing team.
But what if like, I'm the collector, like, I'll I'll set up the presentation template and people will send me stuff and then I
You're
can,
not part of that, you're just putting a template together.
correct, right.
That's one.
Well,
But then I'm not on the
Yeah,
group.
that's fine.
then I'll be out of the group and just edit for like content and continuity and copy edit.
No, I think you need to lead a section. I think you need to
Yes.
lead the, sorry.
Nice
You need to
try.
lead the options section. Raph is gonna lead the end section.
As a preamble.
I think the safest play is if you have to keep it at 7 or less. Even though they're talking about 3 different sections, you're talking about 1 report writing team. That's the umbrella, or else you go OMA and just do that if you want to go, or else you're going to limit it, so.
Problem
I'm happy
don't make
to
it.
help you, Melissa, if you need help, and I'll drop out of the report writing.
I'll be glad to drop out.
Okay.
And I'm around over the 4th.
No, two more drops. Count votes here.
I'll be glad to edit. if you need
Lori,
help.
I feel like this is part of your vernacular, like
Yeah, I do
professionally,
too.
you've done this,
And
you
I'm
need
I'm
to.
around the whole weekend.
No, but I
Doesn't mean
feel
you
like
can't call her.
I need her spiritual guidance, I feel.
I'm really good at spiritual
Can we set
guidance.
up a report writing team and then a feed one team? No. Okay.
No, I feel like Lori
That's me.
would bring a lot to this particular piece.
You don't need me to.
Do you have a name? Why don't you guys just huddle and pick who you want?
Yeah, well, I don't do that.
Take the hat back out of the way.
If you don't need me.
I'll be
I'll
back.
make it.
Now we have 2.
All right, you guys wrap this up, we've got a lot of time on picking the team.
Yeah, we have to.
So if I have ideas for 2 of the 3 sections, can I submit them to one of the people writing the section?
Anybody.
That's a good idea, yes.
That way, I give my ideas to you and you and you or whatever, and then,
Yeah.
You can leave
By
post-its
myself.
on our front door.
yeah, not pros and cons, only just one
How about
thing.
I think what, let me check with everyone to see if this would be helpful. We land on the 7 people for this process, and then we clarify by email to the whole group to whom and how to submit content you think is essential to get in at the
Very
first
good.
draft, so it's really
That's
appropriate and thought through.
Yeah, I have like 5 bullet points for a couple things I want to add.
And we
That's
want, we
great.
want that all, we don't want that just to be at the back end trying to red line. But so let's create a really clear process for how people can send everything, so there's nobody feels like they're cut out of the process. And really just identify the people that are gonna try to assemble all this stuff. They're not writing the report without your input, that's the key message.
So can we just get the hands again of those of you who weren't the first to drop? Like,
I think
let's get this up. I think
if everyone in the room is going to start sending in contributions, one of the Johns should be that filter.
Right.
As opposed to.
Or Nicholas.
Yep.
Or Nicholas.
Who's the best? That's how we worked it last time.
Yeah, that's how we did the brochure.
Worked well.
So who should we say? So who's involved?
Just copy the three of us out.
Who's the, okay.
We'll make sure, copy the three, John, and then
We'll spell it out in the email.
Okay.
We'll spell it out in the email so everybody's not thinking about it.
A deadline would be helpful too, because I'll do it 15 minutes before.
You have
Okay, so then who are the grunt people that we're going to get all this information from everybody? Lori, Ronnie, Raph, who's still in? Davis? Dan?
Mark's story.
Yeah.
Ron?
Ron?
I'm also only gonna fill.
Where's Ron? Got a question.
1, 2, 3, 4,
Julie.
5, 6.
Lori, Ronnie, Raph,
Julie.
Davis, Ron, and who else?
And Julie.
I'm missing one.
You are?
Myself, Lori, Raph, Davis, Ron.
Dan and Lori.
You've got too many.
Is that 7?
Too many.
And that's 7.
The groups.
Yay!
You say one more.
Okay.
6 or?
No, we need to be 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who were they again?
Lori, myself, Raph, Davis, Ron, Julie, and Dan.
All right.
So now which section are you gonna figure that out tonight or no?
We don't care, right? You just send us something.
Okay.
You're talking
Why do you guys
points and
decide this?
authorities. Points and
Well,
authorities.
that's what I was like, just put me in the preamble, because I can give you the
Well,
the
that's
laws
the
that
thing.
will
I would
actually support.
see you in that, in the preamble, but,
Right.
Why don't you guys all 7 get together and
yeah,
do it
you
like-
guys really compliment yourself.
Yeah.
Well, and that is the
Yeah.
next phase, like, that's how we did the brochure, we did it by a conference call after we identified who was doing it, and then, decided who was gonna work on which piece, and then fed it all back to Nicholas, and, then he sent it to Link, or, so that worked, so that's going to be the process on that, and
Link is also available to help us.
they are also available to help us
The
with
crafting
this.
and assembly part.
Yep, and they have samples that they're gonna share with us about what this might look like. They said something sort of like a 30-slide deck is what Michael felt that it was. Okay, so now, it's 20 to 9, we need to get a little bit closer to our action item. I think we still need to talk about them. I think we still need to understand what the framing is. So currently we have B, D, and E as the leads with
C is a question mark.
C as the next one. And then we do also have a number of question marks. We have most of the question marks are around A. And we did also talk about that Monday night, question marks around A and how that might look could look different. And I think that Don has also already looked at how that could look.
Some options to that.
Some options to that.
So I want to come back to a comment Mark Fry that you made earlier, which was, hey man, are there really 3 groups or is it 2? And so I come back to it and I say, I'm not sure, because I see for sure there's 2 groups, but then there's also this A and C in the middle. So I want to come back to the group and say, all right, well, if A has a lot of no's, but it has 7 question marks, and people have ideas, Helen, you mentioned one already. And then C is one that again has more ambivalence around it. Does that represent a different group in your mind versus something that has 1 yes, 16 no's, and 2 maybes?
Yes.
I don't think so.
I look at
Asking
it
me,
differently.
yes.
I see that there's, what we've had so far are basically 2 groups. One group, I see, for example, E closer to C than it is to the other 2. I see B and D having one level of support and C and E having a different.
So, I think this is a good time. I'd like to talk a little bit about E.
Which one?
E.
E is an Edward.
And by the way, just one other point, you can, on E and C, you flip the no's, the maybes either way, and they become almost exactly the same.
I'd like to talk a little bit about E, because I think that there was a shift in E to H. And something that I looked at over the past couple days, since we were all together Monday night, is the difference between,
Based on what, the shift?
oh, from the consensus vote Monday night?
It was 5-14-0 and 4-12-3. I just want to be clear, what's this shift?
We're talking about E?
You said H, right?
No, E.
No, she said E.
I'm sorry.
I
E
just said
was,
E to H.
E was 13, 3, and 3, and 12, 6, and 1. That's E. 13, 3, and 3 was Monday, 12, 6, and 1 was tonight. So I don't think there's been a major shift.
It's like, no,
the
babies went to the
That's what I'm
doctor.
talking about.
Guys,
Let's hear what she has to say.
thank you, Jory.
You're welcome.
It's not about a major shift, it's not about these numbers. It's a conceptual conversation that I would like to have about E and H, okay? One of the things that I noticed is that E could easily have been grouped with F, G, and H because it has the traditional K-5 structure, it has the dual language academies, it has the same number of buildings. When you look at E and H, the difference is in Wayne Thomas or Ravinia. And this is something that I know is out there floating around as a topic, and I kind of wanted to talk about it in a way that is head-on. I believe that when we look at E and we look at H and we talk about our low change options, that in our group of B, D, and E that has emerged, E is our low change option. It looks different from H in the buildings, but it has the same number of buildings, the same programming structure, and it could easily have been grouped with F, G, and H.
Just a point of clarification, I believe E has 9 buildings and H has 8, is that not correct?
no, that's
E.
not correct.
E and H.
Because Wayne Thomas is an early childhood center in E,
So
so that's a 9 building.
I want to look at how E
H
emerged.
has 9 buildings.
H is here.
So it has 9 buildings.
Same premise.
Yeah.
You're
Well, there
counting
is,
early
but
childhood
Melissa, I don't
buildings, they both have
understand.
that.
Just, hey guys, one conversation. There's a point here, let's get through the point, and then we'll have a discussion.
Okay, I have a point on E and H. Okay, to me, the huge difference between
Yeah.
E and H is that H in one school only has 2 sections.
That's what
That's
I wanted to
right.
say.
So let Melissa finish, she's got comments prepared, and
Oh, she does?
Yeah.
I do, I wanted
so
to,
let's get to
She's
that.
done, I'm sorry.
I would really like to talk about how and why E emerged over the course of the past year. I feel like there were a lot of conversations that we had earlier on in the education subcommittee and with the cabinet that maybe not everyone has been privy to. So I want to talk about why BDR had the 2 sections at Wayne Thomas. We're looking at H, it's essentially BDR, has the 2 sections at Wayne Thomas and then has the 2 consecutive, or 2, whatever the word is where they sit next to each other. Contiguous, thank you, elementary schools closed. So what happens in that scenario, if we walk it through, and I want to walk it through, is that the population density that we have in
Rocky
this.
Lori, one conversation.
We have 730 kids between Lincoln, Ravinia, and Braeside. So when 2 of those schools close, you need to relocate about 500 kids. So you push them up. Lincoln goes into Indian Trail. If one of our objectives that we heard from CFAC and we have continued to talk about is to find a solution that gives us balanced and comparable middle schools, you then would need, for that Indian Trail population, to go to Northwood, so that they would have the similar number of kids and similar populations to Edgewood. In that scenario, you would be sending your Lincoln kids up to Northwood, when they may actually live very close to Edgewood. From a population perspective, it's tricky. So the way BDR was structured was that Northwood would be about half the size of Edgewood. They had all of Elm Place, Indian Trail, and Sherwood going to Edgewood.
So pause on that for a second.
Pause on that for a second. So you had 2 very different sized middle schools
So-
in the BDR scenario. In order to keep Wayne Thomas there, you moved everybody else south and had 2 different sized middle schools.
Can we
Yeah.
stop for a second? So we had an extended conversation of that at the executive committee meeting earlier, because of the perceptual concerns about where schools are closing in the community. integrity. And when you go through this analysis, with some of the best founded assumptions that we've come up with on the entire 2.0 process, both in terms of the educational priorities and in the community feedback for equitable distribution of resources. What you see is that H doesn't work anywhere near as well as E because of this incredible physical mismatch of the middle schools that is completely predetermined by keeping Wayne Thomas as a two-section school, which already violates the advice from administration. And number two, it then forces that Northwood site into a configuration that just simply can't accommodate anything like a balanced population. So you end up with a lot of weird things. And so we can talk about this for an hour, but I think the important thing to understand is it's not a light or a sort of impulsive decision to say let's open schools here, close schools here. We have to keep reinforcing to ourselves and to the community the incredible physical constraints and interconnectedness of these decisions and the ripple effect. So just saying let's keep Wayne Thomas open as a two-section school destroys a lot of the integrity of that you can much better achieve with E. So that's why it's really important to understand that is a low change model, but it's one that works a hell of a lot better with or without a referendum than the BDR3 model did.
And part of what happens then is you have a diminished experience for the elementary school at Wayne Thomas, and you have a diminished experience for the middle school at Northwood.
The site.
Because the site is constrained.
Yeah.
Now, there have been suggestions that you can expand Northwood and still keep 2 or 3 section elementary school at Wayne Thomas. But realistically, what that means, if you're doing balanced middle schools, is that you have 1,000 kids coming into that area with only Summit Avenue as your access point. It's very difficult to accommodate that number of students at both the elementary school and middle school level. And H actually has early childhood there as well. So it's early childhood, elementary, and so it's more than 1,000 kids because you have 200 early childhood, all coming into that same space. And I think that we need to think about that in terms of not just how it works for that part of town, but also from an educational perspective, what those experiences are. We got feedback that was a lot of concern about the middle school situation there, that there was an interest in changing that situation. We also talked a great deal about cohorts and reconciling that we have a couple different facilities with smaller and smaller cohorts. We have
I think we're there. I don't
We're
know.
there.
Do we need to keep going on this, or
I just want to clarify. I started to hear something that I want to make sure we all talked about this a great deal in the beginning, but we didn't cover it as much more recently. That again, we are representatives of our community, not necessarily or not our pocket of town. We need to look at it from an educational perspective about what could work down the road for the whole district. And
so for the options group, that's important feedback. Hey guys, can we have one conversation? We need to understand if we're kind of there or not on that piece, because that felt really important to us as we kind of took stock of our discussion on Monday. And it's really important to capture in the options discussion.
So I'm so sad I wasn't at the executive board meeting tonight because I would have loved to participate in this conversation. But one of the things that I've been thinking about along these same lines since Monday, and I know that there's a concern that the community at large may look at north versus south, or closing X number of buildings here, X number of buildings there. Not only do we have to reconcile the needs of the district at large with our existing site and building inventory, it's not just about the buildings, it's also about the bodies. And so population densities and where the kids are factor into this. And I think, that's how he came about, was really trying to create the best kind of...
It's simple math. Putting a small middle school in the highest density area doesn't make any sense.
It also creates a very inflexible, longer range option if you want middle school to change over time, right? So if you think that programming may change, if you think that populations may change, it really is very limiting in the longer range.
Yeah.
I think it's important that when you talk about the process, the ongoing process, and I think, and I'm going to go back to Ann's point on Monday, when she brought up the example of her niece or whoever it was that said, that she was all against closing the school until she heard the reasons why, and I think that needs to go into the process part, that how to explain this to the community, exactly how you just explained it.
It's so interesting you brought this up, because I today was thinking about E versus H. And I'm one of the people that put down H, I'm not embarrassed to say it, as a maybe tonight, because I was like, well, maybe, I said, I wrote, maybe if we could find a way not to have a 2-section school there, then hey, it looks like E. And that was literally what I was thinking in my head, like H looks like E if we can get rid of that 2-section school, because for me, that was like the real thing that dinged it was the 2 sections, because I'm very opposed to those. But then when you talk about it in terms of the middle school being compromised, it like kills me that like I didn't think about that. Because as a middle school teacher, I would hate to put those middle schoolers in a situation where they would be getting compromised in terms of their playing fields or whatever, if there's not enough space for them. So thank you for bringing this up, that makes sense.
Helen, were you gonna say something?
No, I mean, I missed Monday, so I was at a little disadvantage. I was trying to figure out why you were saying, why you were contrasting them as so similar, because to me it's as plain as the the nose on your face that they're not similar, and that the raison d'etre for this is a better middle school. Now, if it's a winning plan or not.
The way in which, the way in which I was thinking about them was that I know that the board has expressed an interest in having a low change option. So I was reviewing F, G, and H.
No, I'm caught up, I'm good.
Okay, well, I'll just briefly. We know that F and G didn't score well, so I was taking another look at H, and that's where I saw that E is just as implementable as H. That E is, in terms of the 3 that have emerged that we've coalesced around, E is the low change option. It could be implemented right away, it could be implemented without referendum. I think Monday night we referred to it as the compromise plan.
That's what I noticed too, was E and H were very.
I just want to say something. So this was my concept E that I was one.
Which were you, E or H?
E. I was the one who initially proposed that. I do not view it as a low change option. And I don't. And the reason I wanted to say that is that the statement you just made about how this does not work without a referendum, I'm a little concerned about that statement because we are assuming.
No, I said it would work.
That's what I'm saying. I'm concerned about that statement because we're assuming a build out for Ravinia to be able to accommodate 3 sections, K through 5, and full day kindergarten, and Brayside as well.
Alex, I don't think that we're all assuming that you would choose to implement full day kindergarten in the absence of a referendum.
Right. I mean, in the absence of a referendum, there are going to be a number of compromises for all of them.
Okay. That's again, I feel like we have to be careful there with making those assumptions as part of this process.
Well, but when you look at BDR, you've got the same problem, right? The previous board was willing to implement it without a referendum.
And knew that it would foreclose the possibility of full day K.
That they were
for the long
Okay,
term.
so I think I don't know if we want to go down this deep depth of conversation about the details of that, because you're making a valid point.
I just want to say, again, this is, as I said, I was the one who proposed this model initially. I think there's a lot of merit to it. I just want to be, I want to be careful about the way we talk about it. As not being, as I think this is more of a change than I think we have to be careful about how much change we're saying this is.
Well, E is one of the ones I proposed to, like way back, but I had a new Northwood. And eventually I ended up telling the old board, this is actually an alternate BDR 3. I said, if you put 6th grade into Wayne Thomas and you put 7th and 8th into Northwood, you could put early childhood into Wayne Thomas as well, and there's room. It is implemented into BDR 3, as is B. They are both able to be implemented in a BDR 3 setting in a similar context or parameters to what the previous BDR 3 was.
Well, and it's not up to us what happens without a referendum, and it's all, but I mean, I will say, like, the understanding for as long as I've been involved in this was that creating the space for full day kindergarten was part of our referendum process. So I understand that may or may not be the course that the board pursues. But, you know, we're not coming up with the plan B, but to the extent that any of these, like, to the extent that you could reboundary, you could close the schools. I'm not talking about full day kindergarten, but you could get the kids to where they're going to be for a soft-ish landing, not beautiful, not elegant, but you could get them there without a referendum.
the current
And then when you're, yeah, the current kids,
kids
exactly.
in the schools right now,
That's right.
you can get them into the
With the
soft
flexibility
landing
to at some
next year
point
would be-
have
and
your two comparable.
And that may be
middle
something you want to throw in the report.
Yeah, I think you
Yeah.
absolutely want to talk about the execution and
What part is
failed
that?
referendum and which one works and explain
Wait,
why, explain why it works or doesn't
Wait,
work.
one thing,
Dan, can you start again?
No, I just wanted to agree with Eric, and that's a point I wanted to make for a while. It would be really useful if you put it in the report, does it work in a failed referendum, and what are the execution issues? And explain that, that would be,
I think you'll also, it'll be,
it's not gonna be obvious, it's not obvious to me. And when people say, well, you can do full grade kindergarten, or you can't, or you can afford it, it's not obvious to me.
it's not, and I mean, there are so many nuances, like where do you put the special ed programs? Because they occupy a certain number of classrooms in certain sites, you would have to figure that out. What does?
Well, just generally capacity, I'm just looking for capacity, does the building have the capacity?
Well, that was not our charter, our mission, I believe, so I don't know that we,
It's not a hard
Would go there.
analysis though, I mean, that doesn't scare me.
no, for that.
There's a chart that Nagel Hartray or Gilbane did about the number of classrooms
Yeah.
that each building would need in different configurations. That's, I think, the kind of thing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for this
Feed what
particular
Well,
one,
we don't have it for this.
the Braeside is gonna have 8 additional rooms, Ravina's gonna have 7 additional rooms. So if you figure 4 rooms, or 3 rooms for a kindergarten, you're still 5 rooms short on one building, 4 rooms short on another building.
Well, you're not gonna put full day K if you don't do a referendum.
Right, you're
No,
not
what
gonna
I'm
be
saying
able
is,
to, yeah.
take full day K out of the picture. You're still 5 rooms short at Braeside, and 4 rooms short at Ravina.
It's all 19 sections, the same number of kids fit into the same number of buildings in H and E. If that's a boundary, that's the way you do your boundaries, it's all 19
I understand,
sections.
I'm saying neither of those work very well without a referendum.
Oh,
Because
no,
you're
that's
close-
true,
because
everything
you're
works better
close-
with a referendum.
Right, I'm just saying, the analysis on how it works with or without a referendum, just go to the maps that Gilbane drew, that Neil Harper drew in Cal rooms. And in this case, you're adding 24 rooms across the district.
And this is why,
Without a referendum, you're 24 rooms short. So take 19 sections of kindergarten out of that, you're still,
and this is why I think you heard some
or not,
comments.
it's just not 19 because you already have half those, so it's.
I'm just saying, in terms of flexibility and in framing the models that have come to the top from the community and from this group here, Model E is most similar to the ones that you guys were interested in that didn't do as well. So my point in discussing this
For different
was
reasons.
it was to give you guys some clarity on what we're giving you, that when we're framing these, that this one is most similar to the ones that didn't do as well in terms of community
Did I miss
feedback.
a board straw poll? Because how do we know who's interested in what?
They expressed last, on Monday night, that there was some disappointment that F&G were not factoring in as much, or that the ones that were lower change maybe didn't get as much feedback because they were.
So,
I think what you're trying to say though, ultimately, and maybe this is a note to how you address Model E, which is to say this, you understand this to be sort of a low change model, and even in a failed referendum, there's a potential understanding that, this could work.
You can take steps
without a
toward it.
Right, to use like a Model E in a failed referendum.
I don't think, I think that scrambling to do,
Or in a positive
scrambling, Helen.
Well, right, but I'm just saying that, just from a capacity perspective, I mean, I think that's what you're trying to get
So
to, is
I think
this
what I'm
is a
trying to
low
say-
change type of option.
And I don't think we want to overcharacterize it if that's.
Yeah, and I wouldn't ask you to do that.
And we don't want to scramble to create more detail. I think ultimately, part of the process needs to be identifying the practicability and what would be the compromises in terms of doing something without a, I mean, it's a very
Yeah.
important,
Yeah.
just how many variables do we kick up in these 5 minutes, so it's not a quick discussion.
No.
I don't think our ambition in the report writing should be to bottom out every detail of that. I think it should be to say, here's some high level points of view on this. And part of the process going forward is we're certainly eager to help sort of characterize or further explain kind of what was behind these ideas in case that's useful in the prioritization and sort of refinement of the models going forward. So
I
we don't want to.
Can I just say, it's 9 o'clock, so a long time ago,
Yes.
you asked me if I still felt that there were 2 buckets rather than 3 buckets.
I
And then we had this long conversation about E and H. And I actually feel like, at first I was like, this is such a digression from where I thought we were trying to get to. But here's where I think. I think what you have done, Melissa, in your discussion of E and H is just illustrated that I still strongly believe that there are 2 buckets. The one bucket is what is the best, what are the best options that we can present forward and say strongly that we think that you should really focus in on these. And that there's this other group, this other 5, that have components, some more than others. We're not ranking them about how many components they have that are of value, but there are some that have more value than others that is going to be captured in the report writing. So I still think that there are 2 buckets. There's the yes, move forward with these.
And other.
And then there are consider the value that these other models present so that you can use those kinds of points in the refinement process. So if one of the things the refinement is 2 sections, you must eliminate 2 sections. That's something that, kind of gave so many feedback notes on F, G, and H. Whatever the case is. So I think strongly there's 2 buckets. And if we're ready to vote on 2 buckets, I think that's
Okay, are we ready to vote on 2 buckets?
Just for one second,
Say
just
something about E versus H,
Yeah.
which is,
one thing.
I understand what you're saying, but the community perception of that is going to be much different, because when you look at this, you're getting Wayne Thomas, which is losing its neighborhood school in E, and it's not happening in H.
They're going to be, so something that we talked about again early on was.
I understand what you're saying, I'm just saying there's a big community perception issue that has to be.
There are shared benefits and burdens to every option. So, yes, the elementary school as it is today would not be there in that model. But the goal would be.
Kids would have to take a bus to Indian Trail.
And
If it fits them, yeah.
I think it comes back to.
But what they are getting, what the trade-off is a comparable balanced middle school, which is what we heard a lot of feedback about. The feedback.
We're not gonna debate this
Yeah,
anymore.
we don't have to.
Right, but the
That's the
feedback.
point. You're raising the point why we
Yeah.
brought it up to begin with, and I think.
That is why we brought it up to begin
There are
with, because we heard
examples
some of that.
That Lori's, or I think it was you were saying you had a relative who went and got educated and then said, okay, now I get why. So Lincoln parents have gone through the journey. So anyway,
Right.
Lori, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to have one, I know this sounds crazy, but one optimistic moment for a second. Because when I looked at the focus group results and when I looked at people coming to the forums and all that stuff, people are ready for change.
Yeah.
And I think that we can all, just have a minute to think about that people are ready for change. So let's be positive, let's think about that. We're not in the same situation we were a few years ago where people didn't know what was going on. No one knew that the buildings were in trouble. People are ready, they know something has to happen, and people want change, and people are
And they're ready
excited.
to move on.
And we're
They're
ready,
sick of this.
people are ready to move on. So I just wanted to focus on that just for 1 second,
Go.
and that was all.
That's the conundrum right there. People want to move on, but they also want other things. And what happens if other things don't pass? That's a conundrum. People want equal-sized middle schools, but they also, 80% say, they want a local elementary school, and those are sort of the unresolvable contradictions we have in this whole process.
Well,
But I
that was
think
the
that's-
responsibility
that's
of
why we're
leadership.
pessimist. None of the options are perfect.
Yeah, you just couldn't let
And
George.
no
You
action.
just couldn't give me moment. You couldn't let us have our piece of it.
Yeah.
And a downer.
Move on.
Okay,
Let's get a motion.
let's get a motion.
What are we motioning?
Davis, let's get a motion.
I agree with you and I love you.
Anybody have a motion?
No, it's
Wait, no, can I just, before we take a motion, I'll actually make a motion, but I want to make one comment regarding the 2 buckets versus 3. So A and C are on the bubble, and this whole question of executability in the absence of a referendum, I think is, I don't know if it's something we want to factor into our work, or if you want to leave that and hold that in advance for now, but to me, because I recognize the very real challenges that this board is going to confront, potentially, that moves those from a maybe in a lot of ways to a no. I have to vote in public anyway, right?
Into a two bucket plan.
Into a two-bucket plan. I think that A and C are both really interesting and really compelling if you have a big bag of money, which we may or may not have.
Okay, so I think what we talked about was coalescing around 3 and getting to a point tonight where we might be able to vote on a suite of 3 options to move forward. No. What?
Not 2 buckets, she says.
But we're voting on the 3 to move forward right now.
Right.
That's fine, I don't know, I was.
A suite
I would
of
suggest that we have to pick the 3 that we think, or the 3 or approximately 3 that we think that we want to feature. The other group, we're going to write the pros and cons about all of those things. There is always the chance that in looking through that process and confronting kind of how it sounds, that we might decide there's more segmentation there that we would want to implement. But I think as a starting point, tonight we need to walk out with a preliminary version of the 3 versus.
We need to vote so that the report team can get going. That's the bottom line.
Ron.
Just a process point. So unless we're changing any of these models, right? If you looked at the votes, there's 4 that got double digits, there's 4 that didn't. And I would just argue that if you really wanted to get down to 3, we ought to just look at the 4 that got double digits. Because the maybes don't matter if we're not gonna change anything. So just if you really wanna get down to 3, we ought to just look at 4 and pick the best 3 out of those.
That's a good,
That works.
I like that.
So BC,
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's, and that's great, I think it's a great idea. The only problem is we've spent 2 hours and we haven't talked about why some people really like something, why some people really don't like something. And we spent 0 time actually discussing any of these models that we voted on 2 hours ago.
We've talked about the models for the past 4
But we haven't
meetings.
talked about why some people are, you know, if we look at the ones that are, you know, one person says yes, we should hear from, if that person wants to stand up and say, on G, why they say yes. There's something we should have the ability to have that discussion. I know we're stressed for time, we're trying to get things done quickly, but when people look back at this part of the process, this could be a disaster.
Do you all wanna go through A
I do.
through H?
I think we should have
this
We did this on Monday.
We did this, we looked at all this on Monday.
Okay. I was
So
here Monday.
here's an option
You were here
in
Monday?
between that. We talked about, Ron, you made a proposal,
You remember,
okay, to say, look, there's really 4 here we should be debating for the yes, not 8. That was what you said.
That's right.
So that means B through E. Does anybody, if we're going to commit to that path, is there anyone who would like to, and I really think this is important that you feel comfortable saying yes, wants to discuss A, F, G, or H before we do that? Or to change that approach, if that's not the right approach, if you don't feel that's right, let's talk about it. Some of us went through all of them on Monday, doesn't mean you don't have the right to discuss them now. Helen?
Okay, on A, which gets 7 maybes, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't know what the nature of I wrote a maybe on A, and I don't know what the 6 other comments were.
Then why don't you ask, what are the maybes?
Oh, I don't care. I just wanted to say.
That's what we did on Monday night.
Well, I'm not saying you didn't. I never said you didn't.
Okay,
I wasn't here.
Go on.
Not at all. I only wanted to say, I wanted to point out the reason for my maybe, and maybe it's the other ones, I don't know. My recollection is that a 4-section school, new construction, that element of A, which could be little building blocks as the way we describe them in forums, is about the same cost as the renovation of 2 of the southeast schools. And I would like to say that that is the reason I put A as a maybe, and that should be, obviously in pairs, it's a different scenario. But that's what I think needs to be noted in your report and or in people's minds. And if I'm mistaken about that, it's possible I don't have those clauses in front of me.
So
I think they're darn close.
I'm glad you brought that up, because what you're saying says, another way of saying what you're saying is, no, I'm good picking the 3 that we recommend out of B through E.
Fine.
But if we, in the write-up, I would like to make sure that we comment or capture these comments that you want to make about A, because they're important.
So
Yes.
Pete, you were asking specifically, what was there to say about A that caused people not to put the, with 10 no's, why it's at the bottom? And I would just like to, since I wasn't here Monday when you discussed, I wanted to make that comment.
And you're not the only person with with a similar comment on A. So
And it could
I made that
apply.
comment on Monday as well, and I had put together
Very
an
good.
8.1.
And it is close, I bet, the cost.
The question is,
I'll send you what I put together.
but you're not saying, I think we should be voting on A as one of the 4 or 3 that we recommend.
No, I think we should, we should move to a vote, but I think what Darren said is right. If people have something left unsaid or weren't able to say something Monday.
I agree. And the other thing about that too, is we talked about in the executive meeting was, as part of the pros and cons of these, and we mentioned this already too, that you can send in your additional thoughts on the models to, are we gonna have that all drive to the Johns and Nicholas?
Yes.
Yeah.
So not all 3 of us.
So those kind of things can go there too.
That's all, I just wanted to say something about it.
Yeah. Does anyone want to speak to F, G, and H?
I was a maybe on H. And the thing I'm thinking, I understand all the space constraints in Northwood and there, but the thing I'm thinking is that if we built up part of Northwood, put a second floor on just one of the wings, we'd be able to actually move the section from Indian Trail to Wayne Thomas. So I'm sort of thinking like H prime, I'd love to get the comment issue into the report.
Northwood can't be built up.
No, you could take down the build up.
Yeah, you would
Right.
still have 1,000 or more kids.
Right, no, I
on
understand,
some of
and then you
that.
want to move your early childhood to one of the extra capacity over Indian Trail. But anyway, so I'm like a maybe on H, but I think, for me, I think being able to have a couple comments in the report or comments during the report sort of makes me feel that.
Yeah,
my
acknowledging
documentation
that there is
is complete.
something there.
But taking down one of the 4 sides of Northwood to build up a second floor, I think gets the capacity, but of course, there's other.
It doesn't get the play space capacity, it only gets you room space. So you still have
I understand,
compromised
as I
play
said.
space.
Well, it allows them to see the value of a local elementary school.
It depends what's valued across the community.
Right.
So
Sure.
that was my maybe on H. I'd love to see an H prime, but we can get that comment in the report.
The only comment I have on G, and I voted against it, was if we don't have a referendum, I believe, but I'm not positive because I don't have the analysis that you've done on it, that could give us all day K, full day K with no referendum.
It could, it definitely could.
So that was my
Same
only
could. So could I.
positive comment for G, that without a referendum, you can have full day K with it.
The challenge with F&G without a referendum is that you need 10 rooms, 10 additional rooms in Northwood. But you can accommodate all of it.
And you still have all the same existing challenges we have now.
Right, but I'm just saying, without a referendum,
Talking about
that
space.
just all day K was the only comment that I was making, not, okay, yeah, then no other problem existed.
D.
I don't want to speak particularly for F, G, and H because they're not my favorite models, but I do take the sort of core of the conversation about E, whether it's actually a sort of low change, low cost potential model or not, as a reminder that when we're thinking about whatever creative enhancements to any of these plans, I do think we owe the community, or the board at least, the ability to explore a low cost or lower change model. Looking again at the survey data that I shared with people today, I'm really struck by that one bullet point. There remains a core group of residents, 25 to 48%, most focused on avoiding higher property taxes. And while I think we can bring a lot of those people along with a smart campaign to explain why we are advocating for changes, I don't want to box everyone into a corner by not having any allowances for people to further investigate. So I'm not really keen on any of these plans, but I'm thematically keen on building in some level of flexibility into the final outcome.
But aren't we putting forward, right at this point, isn't E a vote getter, a top?
Yes, but there's some
He was speaking
disagreement
to
about what E represents. We already talked about that.
But the cost range is the same as F, G, and H.
Right.
So it's there with the most votes,
Agreed.
to the best that we could bring a low cost in.
A motion.
A motion. I'd like to make a motion that we move ahead, recommending B, D, and E to the school board.
Second.
What?
What?
That's
We're
our
not gonna
vote.
vote, we're not gonna.
Yeah.
We need to vote.
You either go for it or you do another.
Motion on the table.
Moved and second.
You can have a discussion.
We can't have a discussion?
You can.
And I would like, my addition here, and I appreciate where you're coming from, is to step back one little bit, and rather than saying anything that would be taken as like, these are our final things, rather that we begin drafting the report in this direction, and then we have an opportunity to, look at this again when we have some text and some things on paper, and people can reaffirm a
That's
little
true.
bit later.
That was the 6th was supposed to be.
That's right.
Why did
The
we,
6th was supposed to be that day.
where did we jump? We were talking about narrowing down to 3. We said, okay, let's look at 4, narrow down to 3. Now we've done that? Did I miss something?
I'm tired, and I'm sad, and I want to go home. And these are the 3 that have come up with the most votes, and I have no problem with what Davis suggested.
I respect
at
your
all.
opinion, but I'm voting no. Because I don't think that's the way to do it. If you need to go home, you should go home. I feel bad, you should, but I'm gonna vote no for that.
That's fine.
Do you want to talk more about why?
Yeah, I think C was pretty close. I think we ought to look at it really closely. And I think if you reshuffle these, I think C might get more. I don't know. I think C has a lot of advantages. I think people are afraid of it, but as many people liked it as didn't like it. And I think the board has to have a lot of flexibility. And I think walking away from that single middle school thing puts the board in a box, and I think throws away potentially what's the best option in terms of long-term costs to the
So
school and for the kids.
I am not opposed to including C. It seems challenging, both in terms of cost and in terms of implementing a Plan B, if the board intends to announce school closings this fall in anticipation of a referendum, you cannot reboundary in such a way that you can get to C at all. Like, you can't put those populations together, Bennett.
This may be a non-starter for some reason you guys have already thought of. I would consider making exactly that distinction in the report and talking about plans that you like, for whatever reason you like them, but depend on a successful referendum, and distinguishing those from plans that don't. Because, obviously an important consideration that we have to deal with as a board is we can't assume a referendum will pass. Even if we vote one in December and so forth, we've got to have, as you say, a plan B. We got to know what are we going to do if it doesn't pass. And for some of these, that's going to be a really important issue. For others, it's a much easier issue. So that might be something you could, you could kind of see then goes in a special bucket.
It makes the case for the 3 buckets, is what you're saying.
I'm not sure I follow that.
On Monday, Linked said, the people said several times that the community had rejected a single middle school and talked about you don't want your referendum to fail. Your community has already told you through your feedback that they did not want a single middle school. I heard them say that several times when they were talking, and I know it was a late night on Monday, but C has a single middle school, and although they did not want to sit up here and say, don't put this one forward, they cautioned very strongly on Monday, when some people weren't here, I know, that we don't put one forward with a single middle school because of the fact we had so much community feedback that the community did not want it.
So the single middle school aspect, if you take that approach, you could also make the determination that the community didn't want 5 through 8, which is B. No offense, but I'm just pointing that out.
Well, no, they retested it. She's not saying just based on the vote.
I'm just saying.
She's saying as it went further along.
The vote against the referendum was based on a number of factors.
But we pulled.
I'm only saying what Link said. I'm not saying.
You didn't ask me, wait, you did not ask
just what
people.
Link said.
You did not ask people for a central school that saves the community money for 30 years.
No, but we did explicitly ask people if the reason they voted against the referendum was because of the location or because of the single middle school.
And what did they say?
We have results from that question.
Right, it was 29, and it was.
All right, I'd like to
But we do
propose-
also have the focus group feedback from Link that they gave us last week. It's the last sheet of the packet that said there was a lot of concern in the focus groups that C would not be
Yeah.
a passable entity. So
I said in all of them, that was a clear theme.
Well-
And it was a clear theme amongst supporters. And the fact among supporters is they didn't see it as, they saw it as being the most effective, most long-term sustainable, but they just didn't believe it would pass.
I'd like
That's why they.
to propose an amendment then, just to see where everybody feels on this. Because there's elements of what I agree with Ron. I propose an amendment to the motion on the table to add a fourth one, that one being C.
Well, then we have to vote on that, right?
Okay.
But then we would also be asking then, if we put that forward as a fourth recommendation, we are also asking for a staff model on that. We are also asking for, so we have to just be a little bit cognizant of what we're asking for by the ones we recommend.
Is that not the board's decision, what they're gonna, even if we put forward 3, could they go back and say, we're only gonna move forward on 2 of these? That's their,
Yeah,
so I don't know if the letter of the law, when this group was formed, was we need 3 recommendations.
No.
3 or more, I think.
Okay.
There's no number.
No, it wasn't.
No number.
So if there's no number, 2 to 3.
It was 2 to 3. was what we
But your
had.
motion is to bring it up to the same level of the other, is that the motion?
That's my motion.
Okay.
Seconded.
So you can take a vote.
You have
What
to vote
order
on
do
the
we have to
amendment
do
first.
these?
You have to do the
Before
amendment.
the major
Yep.
amendment to what?
Did you hear I made an amendment onto Ann's motion, so that there, instead of the 3, B, D, and E, it would be B, C, D, and E, that we would recommend to the board.
No, yeah, last chance.
We have to vote on this amendment, add a 4.
Okay, so call for a vote.
Are we calling, so it looks like we're calling for a vote on the amendment.
Correct, add a 4. Just on the
To add a fourth, so it's been
The amendment
seconded,
is to
so then
add
John,
C
how
at
do
the
we take
same
that?
level.
I'm taking my hand motion.
Okay, hey guys, everybody, pay attention. We are taking a vote by hand to confirm or not confirm, or to
Can there be
confirm.
other discussion on the merits of C for 1 second before we take that vote?
Yes.
Okay, so I'd just like to say that I love the plan and I love the concept, but I don't believe it could, I don't know, John could speak to it better, but I want everyone to consider that that would be a site with almost no land whatsoever, unless, and that was my little maybe thing there, they were to try to do an acquisition for off-site parking and mechanical and stuff like that, of which there is a lot of land around there they could acquire, I'm sure. But that would add to the potential cost of it. And I'd like people to consider that before they bring that up, because I don't know what, John, how you tested these before you let these move along, but I think it's pretty questionable that you would have a functional middle school in C without a land acquisition.
As someone who stood at the board for C on the forum night, I just want to say that the thing I heard the most was people saying how they loved the idea of having a centrally located middle school, but they thought it was going to be a real problem for traffic. And they kept saying over and over again, have you done traffic studies? Has anyone done traffic studies? Has anyone done traffic studies? And I kept saying, no, we haven't done them yet. No, we haven't done them yet. So I would be hesitant to put it forward without doing a traffic study, which I know we don't have time for.
Well,
No, we would
Jory-
never do the traffic study.
Jory, based on that feedback, that people are interested in having something centrally located, we do have B that addresses that there is something centrally located. So it would need to be more of a swell around wanting a single middle school.
Right, and
Can I just put together a couple pieces here? I struggle a lot with the idea of C being at the same level as the other ones. And here's why. Because the themes, there's no doubt there's a ton of merits to it, just as there were a ton of merits to the earlier proposal that failed in the referendum. Because of the single middle school and some of the benefits of that. What I struggle about is if we really look objectively at our process and the feedback that we've gotten, whether it's right or wrong, there has been a very clear, loud theme throughout about single middle school campus that is a very different type of feedback and incredibly strong negatives around it. So regardless of whether we can unpack it and do a really great job of doing a much selling it and pointing out the differences and the advantages and all that, that could all be very achievable. But I struggle with whether where we are and what we've done, we see as encouraging a signal as we see for the other things in terms of just the basic feasibility. There's a huge hill to get over. In my mind, if I look back at the surveys, the focus groups, and the community engagement, unanimity about a strong negative piece around that, every place you look. So the idea that that is the same level of recommendation, I really find that challenging. Whereas we could say, there are incredibly, in our other bucket, which is now less problematic and sort of labeled now that it's like, here's some simple recommendations that have more positives than negatives. Here's one that has really strong positives, but just as in the vote here, it's very ambivalent. And in a ton of education required a lot of people's first reaction to, are you kidding me? You're talking about a single middle school campus again. And do we want to sign up for that? Or do we want to burden the board with that again? I don't know. I don't see that as equal to the others in terms of all this feedback that we've been getting. And I feel that putting that forward as our recommendation, I feel that actually, I question the credibility of 2.0.
It would hurt us.
Yes,
What
I
who in the
agree.
community we're talking to,
Would hurt
that's
us.
the thing people are supporting.
If I may, I also want to loop back to the survey results. Thank you for providing the link, that was very helpful. 78% of respondents feel that keeping a neighborhood grade school is at least somewhat important, including a majority of 53% who say it is very or extremely important to them. We know we're closing elementary schools. We know that. Closing a lot of elementary schools presents a real challenge to the success.
UBC closes so many more. Right?
So many.
So to that point, listen, I'm just talking about C because it's a different type of ask. I'm not disagreeing with anything you were saying. But the point is, the largest thing that people disliked about the referendum was its cost. And when cost is talking about the referendum cost, what we have not unpacked, to use Brad's terminology, what we've not unpacked is the long-term viability of all 8 of these plans.
And this one blows all of the others.
But that's something that
But it
I
doesn't
think-
have to.
But no,
Why do we have to?
long-term
No, I know that's the best one, and so we'll go down to one school, it'll be cheaper yet. But the point is comparatively, we'll be at the same level as our population to schools as our neighbors when we get down to 8 instead of 12. So what's the fascination with getting to 5?
Okay, so if I
We're
could finish,
meeting the objective.
if I could finish, I
Yeah.
believe most of the early models had us having a situation where we were crossing the fund balance at a point in time which was not a great distant future, with 10, 9, or 8 schools. This is the one that's different. Like it or not, it's different. And that's something that we never tested with the community. I think some people here, 10 people both times, I think, said, I like it. We've talked about that. We have not tested that. I agree with the aspect of the site is potentially challenged, but we also haven't value engineered the site. We also haven't looked at opportunities to do things. I don't think it's the best model here. It's not, I think there's better models, but I think it's something that is unique and it solves a long-term problem that this community has burdened itself with for the last 30 years. For others.
Putting it all together, I think that, is there a place where you can say, there are some strong positives about this, but they need to be refined? 2.0 has not done what you're describing for all of these models. So that is one way to look at that as part of the transition process. I just think that based on the feedback that we're publishing, this stack of stuff, for you to come out and say, hey, C looks great, isn't contained in what we're going to present.
That's right.
That's the disconnect, that's the credibility problem that I think we have. If people are looking for predetermined
I'm not sure I totally
patterns
agree
and
with that
stuff
point.
like
I
that.
mean, I think there's a lot of comments we got about lack of diversity and how things were moved around. That sees that problem more than any other. And I think that was a big issue in a lot of people's comments. You go back and look at all the verbatim things, I read them all. That
Lack of
comment,
diversity of the
But
plan.
that was, so in what we presented at the forums, we were consistent in keeping dual at a single middle school location because that was the parameter that we had been working within. We understand that there may be flexibility there now, and so that does change things. So we did have that in the focus group dialogue about whether or not a single middle school would have the same appeal if 2 middle schools both had dual language. So it was part of that dialogue to ask about that particular piece.
Because that's what I was saying the other day, that is a huge parameter that is in flux right now, huge.
Right, it is.
Totally changes everything. How could we even vote on this right now?
Because the plans are flexible enough to do it. The board
Yeah.
can do it.
Could I also point out?
I know, but how you look at each model, depending on that, is completely different. Flexibility aside.
According to
Well, you have to look at
our
it.
educational matrix or the evaluation or whatever, if I'm not mistaken, help me out, I didn't look back at the numbers, I think C scored the highest. Education, from what we said is our educational criteria, and we also know, if we want to talk about data, most people said they want the best education for the students. We want a competitive school district, and if this is a model that will give us that competitiveness, I've heard all the negatives, I just want to make sure that we're presenting both sides, and then I'd love for us to be able to move on to
When
a
something
vote.
is strongly ambivalent, it's not the same as strongly positive. That's the only difference that I'm.
No, I'm hearing,
The other
But I don't think it's
thing
strongly
that
ambivalent, there was people on
comes
both
out
sides.
in
That's
the
not
Ambivalent is,
community,
that's what that means.
community values is equity. And I
You
think
feel two ways
this
about
model
something.
creates equity with the two
They don't.
They don't.
elementary schools.
Well,
the
the community appeals to the community.
more than any other.
Lee stated, don't put it forward. He stated that repeatedly, don't put it forward, you don't want.
Did not say that.
He
Did not say
He
that.
said that,
Go listen.
it's not going to work.
Did not say that.
He said it a couple of times.
get to a vote?
I'm comfortable whether,
Hey, guys,
I am comfortable whether it's included as one of the main options or something along the lines of an honorable mention, where we talk about we're recommending that the board take this option and include questions about it in their survey and do a traffic study, and then to look at it again to see if they want to push it forward.
Yeah, maybe don't staff it right away, just do your traffic
Right, so
study
it's
right from the beginning.
so it's an honorable mention.
I like that.
Okay, but that's all part that goes into the report. I think we do
But
still need
there's a motion on
to.
the vote.
Listen, that's
We
the
have-
three buckets. The three positive, the ambivalent, which right now is A and C, and the,
I don't think
I think we're
they
handcuffing the board.
third bucket.
Yes.
Well, on the
We need to
vote,
include these things in the report, but for now, we need to address, hey guys, there's a vote on the table that we need to address, there's an item. So Mark had proposed an amendment to Ann's motion to include C as a fourth option for recommendation. So we need to take a by-hand vote of who would like to include C as a fourth recommended
Really
option.
what it is saying that B, C, D, and E are the four recommended options.
No, this is an amendment to that. So this is simply saying add C, to whatever
Right.
the ultimate motion will be.
Just,
So
Yes,
Ann
no, you wanna add
put
C,
D and
yeah.
E, so right now we are voting hands in the air if you want to include C.
Is this, I was gonna say, is this the include C as the
Recommend C in the next vote.
Include C,
It's not
as-
appendix?
Eight, okay.
No.
Opposed, again.
That isn't appendix. That is
Right,
not.
motion passed.
No, don't you need those, or do you?
We need to know.
No, you need to.
Can you redo that?
Motion, yes, not a majority.
the motion
Has
fails.
to have-
Amendment failed, now you go back to the original motion.
Okay.
Now we go back to Ann's motion.
Yes.
Wait, did the amendment pass or the amendment?
Failed.
The amendment failed.
Spranger's thumb went like that.
Yeah,
I
but
can't.
not everybody can see you, you have to lean your just a minute, right?
Can you read the motion again?
Okay, so what's
The motion was, let me find it in here. The motion that we move ahead recommending B, D, and E for board consideration.
I would like to go back to what we said first, which is that we look at these four together and rank them 1, 2, 3. That would be my preference, to look at B, C, D, and E and rank them 1, 2, 3. Because I do wonder about which vote, what it would end up with. And it could be the same thing as we're saying now, but it'd give a chance to put it in.
We're not ranking.
just the motion.
I understand, but what we discussed about 20 minutes ago was amongst the four B, C, D, and E, let's find 3 of those. And so I think Ann moved in front of that by saying she's just going to say B, D, and E, but my question is, if we ranked them 1, 2, 3 of those 4, whether we get the same thing as Ann's original motion. Well, I don't know how the minute, I mean, I don't know Robert's Rules of Order all that well, but that'd be my preference.
But doesn't this do that?
Already seconded.
Yeah,
Already got that. Got
No,
it.
he's saying doing it with just
Well, but
to
if you
make
eliminate,
people choose
if you
between
eliminate,
those four.
but if you eliminate.
Yeah, you have to vote on the
Yeah.
motion already.
Right, I understand we need to vote on Ann's motion, but I want to vote no because I'd like to go back to the
For that or any other reason.
I think you might not vote it.
Yeah, so the point is that the yeses in F, G, H, and A could move, could change the rank order of B, C, D, and E.
Well, C is back in here.
I'm making a comment on discussion of whether to vote yes or no on Ann's motion.
Okay.
Fred, I don't understand what you're trying to find out.
I think he's saying, let's do a straw poll on B, C, D, and E to see where people land.
Above one of the other ones.
You know, I think we'd be making, a mistake if we rank these, because it's gonna present it to the public
I'm
as
sorry.
a ranking, and it's gonna
exactly what
tie the
we're
hands of the board in a certain way that we don't wanna do.
I don't want to say yank rank, and let me yank the rank and
I
say
think-
three yes of the B, C, D, and E, because
Take a
the
straw
question would
poll
be
of
that
those four
F, G,
We've
H,
already
and
voted
A.
down, including C.
No, but you didn't vote down there's, when you have 4 things and you want to choose 3, there's 4 different choices, you know, B, C, D, E, C, D, E,
That's
et
true,
cetera.
Brian, so you're presenting other options to.
I'm going back to what we said 30 minutes ago.
So you're presenting other options, how to sort them on the 4.
Yes.
That should be contained, so essentially, we have a motion on the table right now
That's been seconded.
to have, we need to take a vote on the 3, B, D, and E. If you don't think those 3, that you're ready to make a call on that, if you think you are ready to make a call and say, I like B, D, and E, and I think that's the suite we should recommend, vote yes. Okay? If you think we should do, if either you don't like B, D, and E, or you would like more information in the way that Brian is suggesting, or other ways to try to figure out what people really think are the top 3, then vote no, and we'll take it from there. Okay?
Just 1 second.
No, please.
I'm not going to talk, I just want to see the votes.
B,
That's okay.
please, God.
Okay, no, it's fine.
Let's all in favor.
Okay, so we're gonna call for the vote on Ann's motion for B, D, and E as our suite of recommendations to the board. All in favor, raise your hand.
Dan, what's going on?
No, I'm not going. I got it.
Well, then that passes.
All right.
The rose and blue resolution. Let the bells be loud and joy.
But just, yes.
What? How did you get my ear?
Can I remind everybody that voted no, everything you might have said in that document, in the resolution, is exactly going to be in the document.
Yeah.
And we can characterize it however we need to, since the team is ready to vote and say, that's how we'd like this to go to the board. So this is not the end of discussing C or any other part of this.
But we're 2 bucket ending.
We do have a bucket.
So we have that bucket and the
This is the other
remainder.
bucket. We're not gonna.
Right now, we only have the 1 bucket. We have the 3 B, D, and E that make up the suite that we are recommending to the board.
And other models.
And others, the other group.
Two procedural points. One,
Okay.
can we update this calendar at some point on what the dates we're actually meeting? Because it's different, it changes apparently.
So we're down to 3 meetings. We have, next Thursday is the 6th.
Yeah.
We are meeting on the 6th here at 7. The next meeting is the 11th, also at 7. And then the third one is the 17th.
No.
No, the 18th.
The 18th is our presentation, the 17th is our last group
That's the
meeting.
dress rehearsal.
Dress rehearsal.
For the 11th, since the board is having a meeting at the same time, what are the logistics?
We're starting at 6.
Planning to go over by 7?
No, you guys, they've reserved Elm Place Library for you guys.
We'll be at Home Place Library.
On the
We're-
18th.
The reason I haven't sent that out, we're confirming that we can get the space clean enough to get everybody in there.
So we're gonna send out 2 things by email after this meeting, not tonight necessarily, but tomorrow. One of them is clarifying, those who are not on the report writing direct team, how do you get your ideas to the right people to ensure that they're included in the report draft? And the second thing is we'll just send out the calendar in the email body as well for anyone who has fun with.
And for the 7, you're gonna reach out to us, and someone's gonna reach out to us and tell us what we're doing.
I can see that.
For the 11th? No, for the
No,
group of
the-
7.
Why don't we huddle for
For the group of 7,
right now?
yes.
Before we get to the one before we-
Yes, do I need a
Comment to the board, just
Yeah.
a recommendation. When you talk about whether things can be implemented without a referendum, please go back to the charts that they drew and count the rooms that we're at and how many rooms are needed for kindergarten and how many rooms are needed for other grades. Because it's very telling. I can give you the numbers if someone wants to talk to me about
I
it.
would propose, though, that we don't address that in our report. I don't think that we need to address what could or could not happen without a referendum. I think we were
I thought
talking
you
about
said
that.
you were going to.
I think we were talking about that just for the sake of discussion about the models that were lower change. I don't think that we said we were going to
Then I
include in our
misunderstood.
report whether or not something could be
I
implemented.
think what we don't want to do, what we want to avoid is making statements that are
Yeah.
not factual.
And that we can't support because we don't have all that information. Well, we don't, but we don't
I
know
think-
what you guys may decide to include or not to include. So whether or not it's possible to implement it, we don't know because we don't know what else it includes.
I think
So
the
that's not
request
something
that
I
was
don't
made
think-
was to, if there is, to provide some guidance around, in absence of a referendum, this is what you could do with this model.
Creative ideas about what could
Yeah.
happen or how it could look.
Yeah, like, so this is the fully baked idea, but in absence of a referendum, this is kind of what you can expect from this model. So something like that.
Yeah,
I think
not a
that was-
definitive, you can do this. Because we wouldn't want to make that kind of.
So the comment still stands, though. If you're gonna make those types of recommendations, make them based on the plans that were given to you.
Thank you.
3 section schools.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Yes.